Chapter 1753. Northern Heaven Cold Abyss, Clear Serenity Cave, Lingbo Small World. Lu Yen tied her hair with a silver ring and wore a white robe. Her gaze was restrained as she sat on a jade lotus. Below her was a clear pond. She had been in seclusion here for nearly 500 years. Because she had received the teachings of the superior techniques and her own temperament, after such a long period of cultivation, no matter if it was her cultivation or qi, it had long been polished to perfection, without any flaws. At this moment, she was only missing the root fruit from the upper realm. Although the school of Shenyuan had passed down secret techniques on how to find the root fruit, she still had to rely on herself in the end. In the past, there were many people with extraordinary talent who clearly had the superior secret techniques, but they were always hesitating before the heavy barriers and could not find the right door. Even though this step wasn't as dangerous and unfathomable as an ordinary breakthrough, if one's state of mind was slightly unstable, then one might not have the chance to see the true outcome. If one suffered a setback and became dispirited, then one's path towards the Tao might come to an end. Relying on her own determination and willpower, after a long time, she finally guarded the heavenly passes one by one with her qi. In the consciousness, the originally unpredictable root fruit had gradually revealed itself. She understood that she could not hesitate at this moment. Otherwise, if she wanted to find the root fruit again, even if she started all over again, she might not be able to succeed. Thus, she made up her mind and suddenly went up to welcome it. In an instant, there was a loud bang in her mind. Then, she felt her heart was extremely calm and empty. She was in a trance as if she was one with the world. In the next moment, she felt a clear spring flowing through her heart. The karma that was tangled in the past was washed away. Her mind also felt incomparably clear, as if everything had been reborn. She slowly opened her eyes and slowly released her aura. The surrounding clear water was affected and rippled slightly. Then, water droplets after water droplets floated up from the pond like a string of jade beads. They gathered more and gradually rose to the top of the cave. From afar, it looked like a curtain of rain was hanging down, and there was a sweet sound coming from it. In the pond, white lotuses were also blooming, the fragrance seeped into the heart, and the room was filled with light. At this moment, as soon as he thought about it, he felt the magical power surging towards him. The cave was like a boat, riding on the waves, swaying with the waves. He raised his hand gently, and for a moment he felt as if the power of heaven and earth was in his palm, and he could move it according to his will. How could he not know that he had successfully severed his mortal body, and that his lifespan would exceed 10,000 years? Her thoughts turned and she unconsciously recited, "The mysterious ripple jade platform takes the spiritual seed, the light congeals to reflect the clear sky. Sweet dew cleansing jade pill, celestial river flowing dress, celestial shadow follows." With a flick of her sleeves, she emerged from the clear pool. With a slight thought, she was already outside the small world. After a cultivator enters mortal shedding, their mana and qi are perfect. Therefore, even though she walked outside, there was still no movement inside or outside the small world. Those disciples didn't know that their masters had already entered this realm without a sound. She stood on top of Zhaoyu Mountain and looked down. At this moment, the world in her eyes seemed to have changed. Everything seemed to not be as eternal as before, but constantly changing. Right at this moment, she suddenly sensed something in her heart. She unconsciously raised her head to look at the sky and felt that there was an aura that was above everything. If it was said that she had already jumped out from the waves of the world, then the person behind the aura would be the sun in the sky that looked down on all the worlds in the world. At the same time, she felt that the qi was very familiar, and her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. Master? At this moment, how could she not understand that when she was in seclusion, her master had already entered that indescribable realm? She couldn't help but feel a heartfelt joy in her heart. With a thought, clear light rose under her feet, and she faced the endless Milky Way and headed towards the void. Not long after, a huge palace appeared in the sky. She had been here before, and knew that this was where the Green Sky Hall was located. But looking at it now, it was different. As she moved forward, she suddenly felt her body stop for a moment. When she looked again, she realized that this place was no longer the original world. She had clearly entered another world. She knew that this must be the means of her master, so she followed the majestic chi dynamic. Not long after, she landed in front of a magnificent palace and walked inside. She arrived at the main hall in a flash and looked up. She saw a Taoist in a black robe sitting on a dais. Above him was a canopy of chi that reflected the sky and the world. Behind him, there was a five-colored true light that flowed like a wheel. Beside him stood a young Taoist. She suppressed her surging emotions and came up to pay her respects. She said, "Disciple greets master, and wishes master to enter the upper realm." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He said, "Disciple, you don't have to stand on ceremony. I am also very happy that you were able to sever your mortal body." The young Taoist beside him straightened his face and bowed. He said, "Greetings, senior sister." Lu Yenny thought for a moment and asked softly, "Are you junior martial brother Fu?" The young Taoist said, "My name is Tsun Xiao now." Zhang Yan said with a smile, "I have already opened up your junior martial brother's past consciousness. It's just that his cultivation is not enough, and his mortal fate has not ended, so he is still using his present life name." Lu Yenny revealed a look of concern. She asked, "Master, have the two junior martial sisters and junior martial brother Han returned to the sect?" Zhang Yan said, "Their fate has not arrived yet. Moreover, they have other matters to deal with. Even if they force themselves to enter Dao, they will only invite disaster." Lu Yenny had been in seclusion for hundreds of years. Just now, she had not come out for a long time, so she did not know what had happened in the inner and outer realms. Now that she heard the word disaster, her expression froze. Zhang Yan said, "It's not difficult for you to know everything that has happened in the outer realms after you go back. I won't talk about it one by one here. Now that you have come out of seclusion, do you have any plans?" Lu Yenny thought for a moment and said, "Master entrusted the Xinyuan branch to me. However, after 2 or 3 generations, there are few disciples who have achieved anything. This is my fault. From now on, I am willing to urge the disciples to work harder in their cultivation." Zhang Yan shook his head slightly and said, "The general trend of heaven's secrets is not something that a human can go against, but it is not your fault. In fact, in these years, not only the Shenyuan branch did not have any outstanding people, but the entire Qinsong school and even the sects in the 9 continents were the same. On the contrary, there were few outstanding people in Zhang Yan's generation. On the surface, it was not difficult to find the reason. In the past, the spiritual opportunity in the 9 continents had gradually declined, and the internal and external struggles were fierce. Everyone knew that if you did not advance, you would fall behind. Those who were able to obtain a position in the sect had talent and temperament that far surpassed their peers. Now, spiritual opportunity was abundant, and the cultivation of the Tao did not lack external things. It seemed to be very beneficial to cultivation, but in terms of temperament, it was a bit more slack and a bit less courageous. However, if one really thought about it, such a situation was actually quite normal. Things in the world rose and fell like the waves. There were always ups and downs. Although the sects were in a bit of a slump, it was only in the past 1 or 2,000 years. In tens of thousands of years, looking back, this short period of time was nothing more than a small splash in the surging river. It really did not count for much. If the mountain and sea realm were like the vast heavens, which had existed for millions of years, it would not be difficult for the outstanding people who emerged from it to surpass the latter. However, he knew that as the workings of the heavens continued to revolve, the Zhou Huanyuan jade would soon appear in the world. Because of that, more outstanding people would appear, and what followed would be a karmic tribulation. With the exception of true young cultivators, everyone would be caught up in it. Even if you went into secluded meditation to avoid the world, it would be useless. The only way to avoid it was to go with the flow. He said, "There is no need for you to worry too much about the affairs of the sect's disciples. Everyone has their own destiny. However, the heavens will change in the future. Everyone under the true yang realm will be caught up in it, and it will not be easy to avoid it. As my eldest disciple, I cannot allow anything to happen to you." As he said that, he sent a wisp of his consciousness over and said, "You can do as I say in the future. You have a strong foundation, so as long as you are careful with your words and actions, you will be able to escape from this calamity." After receiving the divine will, Lu Yen studied it for a moment, and then realized what was going on. She said earnestly, "Disciple will obey master's instructions." Zhang Yan extended his finger, and a jade slip appeared. After the mortal shedding realm, he said, "It is a completely different world. This is a bit of master's cultivation experience. You may take a look." Her disciple cultivated one of the 5 arts and 3 scriptures of the Qinsong school, the Xuanzi True Subtlety Upper Cave Art. It was a top magic, and once one's cultivation reached a certain level, it would not be difficult to sever the past and future bodies. However, if one was not a direct disciple of the sect leader, there would be many difficulties that would be difficult to overcome. Fortunately, considering the level of his cultivation base, he could tell at a glance what difficulties his disciple might encounter in the future. Furthermore, this jade slip contained various secret techniques on how to overcome them. Lu Yen accepted it solemnly and said, "Many thanks, Master, for this technique." Zhang Yan said, "After Master established the Azure Sky Hall, it has become another world. Before you leave the mountain gate, you may stay here to cultivate. If you have any questions, you may come and ask me." Lu Yen happily agreed. Ever since the disciples' cultivation base had improved, Zhang Yan would usually teach them by imparting them. He rarely taught them face to face. If she could learn from him from time to time, the gains would not be comparable to cultivating on one's own. Zhang Yan gave her a few more words of advice and ordered her to consolidate her cultivation base. Sun Shao thought for a moment and asked, "Master, just now, you said that once the tribulation arrives, everyone will be in it. Does that mean that disciple will not be able to escape?" Zhang Yan smiled and nodded, "That is indeed the case. However, Master also said that one must follow the general trend." Sun Shao was puzzled. "Then what is the general trend?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You do not need to worry about this now. You only need to cultivate." Sun Shao bowed and replied, "Yes." In fact, he was not afraid of this. He knew that he was the disciple of a true young almighty. If even he could not protect his life, then no one in the world would be able to escape. At this moment, Zhang Yan walked towards Bu Shutian with a deep gaze. In the future tribulation that he saw, his disciples might be dragged into it. This was actually only a possibility in the future, but it was not certain that it would happen. However, he could not underestimate it. If he could find a way to eliminate the cause and effect that would affect the future, or divert the general trend, then he could easily avoid it. However, he knew that if he did this, then the other great figures would do the same as well. It was even to the extent that the fiendish devils and the heavenly devils would use all sorts of methods to scheme against him. This would cause numerous secrets of the heavens to be thrown into disorder, causing it to be even more difficult to deduce clearly. Thus, there were still numerous dangers present here. However, if a true young cultivator forcefully protected his disciples, then few could do anything about it. However, the changes of heaven's mysteries were not only temporary, but also long-term. He could avoid it this time, but he might not be able to do it again. Thus, the best way was to enter the world to train and find a way to eliminate the current tribulation. Chapter 1754. Kunsher Continent, Zhaoyuan. After the battle between the human path tribes and the other species, there were no more major disputes. Time flowed like water, day and night, and in the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. The human path tribes of today were very different from the past. The leader of the Jade tribe, Yao Ganin, had led the tribes to defeat the other species and take back Zhaoyuan of Qiong Mountain. Using his prestige and the soldiers under his command, he forcefully changed the system of elected elders. Before he died, he passed the position of tribe to his son, Yukong, and officially changed the name of the tribe to Zhao, to show his legitimacy. By now, the 6th generation Zhao king, Zhu Chao, had ascended the throne. The power of the tribe was at its peak, but under the appearance of prosperity, there were many hidden dangers. In the Taichung Palace, the attendant, Yin Chang, said loudly, "Our king has just ascended the throne, so we should apply for titles again. This way we can calm the hearts of the tribes." Also, the Gu tribe and the Ying tribe are large tribes outside of Cheong Mountain. They should also be printed and sent out to appease them. Zhu Chao was only 12 years old. He was a thin and weak youth with fair skin and delicate features. 3 days ago, with the help of his mother and tribe members, he had ousted his elder brother and ascended to the position of ruler. Because he had been pushed onto the throne in a hurry, he was not familiar with the affairs of Zhao. At this time, he asked curiously, "Are there still Zhao tribes of our people outside of Cheong Mountain?" Yin Chang explained, "Yes." Zhu Chao asked in confusion, "These two tribes are all Zhao people, not those half-humans of the other species?" Yin Chang replied patiently, "The ancestors of the Gu tribe and the Zhao people are of the same lineage. 1,000 years ago, the pass of Cheong Mountain was occupied by the other species. The ancestors of the Gu tribe were blocked outside. With the guidance of the great shaman, they went to the southwest to hide, and have lived on Deling Mountain until now. As for the Ying tribe, they are also from the same tribe that was stranded outside. It is said that the people of this tribe are martial artists and can kill great demons. After the Zhao people took back Zhaoyuan and opened up the road, they came to offer their names and pay tribute. The late king gave them flags and armor and allowed them to join the Zhao alliance." Zhu Chao thought for a moment and said, "Bring me the map." As soon as the order was given, 6 bare-chested slaves carried a large polished bronze board up and set it up in front of them. Yin Chang took a step forward and pointed out the location of Cheong Mountain. Then his finger moved to the southwest. After passing through several rivers and mountain ranges, he placed a heavy emphasis on a tree. This is the location of the drumming tribe. Rumor has it that the entire tribe lives on the crown tree. He then moved upwards towards the northwest. A moment later, he pointed at a platform diagram. This is the Ying tribe. This tribe resides on the Yi Mountain platform that rises from the ground. Zhu Chao turned his head to look at the location of Cheong Mountain on the map, then looked at the positions of the two tribes. Judging the distance, he exclaimed, "These two tribes are able to establish themselves on the wastelands so far away?" He couldn't help but reveal a yearning expression as he said, "I wonder if I can tour around those two tribes." The moment Yin Chang heard that, he was greatly alarmed and said, "Absolutely not. My king is the ruler of the people. How can he leave Zhaoyuan so easily? Even if your subject agrees, my subject will not agree." Towards the end, his face flushed red. His voice was so loud that it echoed throughout the hall. Zhu Chao also jumped in fright when he heard such a roar. He shrunk his body and said, "I heard. You don't have to do this." Yin Chang sighed in relief and bowed. He said, "Your Majesty, it is good that you accept my advice." Zhu Chao felt a bit wronged. He didn't have such thoughts at first and was just saying it casually. After a while, he carefully asked, "Is there anything else that I need to do with these two paintings?" Yin Chang's expression was solemn as he said, "Your Majesty still needs to confer a land. This is also very important." He pointed to the north of Cheong Mountain. This is where the Sea of Stars is located. Ever since the foreign species left, there have been demons attacking our people from the sea every year. Fortunately, there are tribes guarding along the coast. They are not enough to harm the hinterland of our Zhao tribe. Every generation of kings who ascended the throne would write a letter to confer titles and bestow wealth and goods. My king should appease this tribe. Zhu Chao nodded repeatedly and said, "I also know about this. I heard that everyone has a golden worm with them. I wonder what the golden worm looks like. If I can find it." Under Yin Chang's stern gaze, his voice became softer and softer. In the end, he said weakly, "Then we will do as your Majesty says." Yin Chang's expression finally relaxed as he said, "After these are settled, there is another important matter. When the ruler ascends the throne, he should gather the leaders of the tribes and worship the heaven and earth and the four world creators. After that, he should also kill animals to sacrifice to the gods of our people." His expression became abnormally solemn. "Your Majesty, when you worship, you must use sincerity and must not be disrespectful. Otherwise, there will be a disaster within our Zhao tribe. Zhu Chao's face paled as he listened and said, I will remember. Yishan platform. Yuan Zhen was currently sitting in a cave, cultivating. For 100 years, under his efforts, the Ying tribe grew from a small settlement of 1,000 people to a large tribe with 300,000 people. Originally, he wanted to teach them Dao techniques, but he gave up on the idea later on. Because in the past 100 years, there was not a single person who could catch his attention. In the end, he only took in one disciple who followed him. Moreover, he was the one who took the initiative to raise the aptitude of the disciple. Otherwise, he would not even be able to pass the test of opening the meridians. At this moment, his heart trembled as he felt a consciousness entering his mind. How could he not know that it was the two Taoist lords who were passing on the message? He quickly took a look, and after a while, he let out a breath and pondered, initially, I wanted to prepare for a few more days. However, if it is as the two Taoist lords predicted, then this opportunity cannot be missed. He first sent out a talisman. Then he stood up and turned to the back cave. There stood a jade statue of a young girl. She had starry eyes and red lips. Her jet black hair hung down to her shoulders. Her head was lowered and she looked shy. This girl was personally carved by him using countless precious materials. She could be said to be extraordinarily beautiful. Women in the mortal world could not compare to her. He walked forward and raised his hand to touch the center of her brows. With a faint sigh, the young girl actually came back to life. She bowed and said, Ding Ling greets teacher. Yuan Zhen grunted, tidy up first. I will send you to King Zhao's side. You should know what to do. Ding Ling lowered her head and said, disciple understands. Yuan Zhen said indifferently, although you are now forever young and will not show any signs of aging until the end of your life, your lifespan in this world is still only 80 years. You won't get any more. When the time comes, you will immediately turn back into a jade statue. Ding Ling's delicate body trembled slightly. Fear appeared in her eyes. Yuan Zhen continued, if you are successful in doing things, it is not difficult for teacher to help you live a long life. Ding Ling bowed deeply, I dare not delay teacher's matter. Yuan Zhen grunted and said, follow me. He turned around and walked out. Ding Ling followed behind him. A disciple dressed in Taoist robes was standing outside the door. He cupped his fists and said, Master, the diplomatic group and all the tributes have been prepared. Yuan Zhen looked at Ding Ling and said, you will go with them this time. Ding Ling replied in a low voice. When the disciple saw her, he seemed to be stunned by her appearance. He immediately stood there in a daze, not knowing where he was. Ding Ling hurriedly lowered her head and tied a veil on her face. The disciple just now came back to his senses and realized that he was inappropriate. He hurriedly coughed to cover it up. However, Yuan Zhen watched coldly from the side and said, go. The disciple's expression turned serious. He bowed to Ding Ling and said in a gentle voice, Lady, please follow me. Ding Ling nodded gently and followed him down the mountain. Seeing the two of them leave, Yuan Zhen's eyes flickered and he thought to himself, let's see how useful this chess piece will be. In Jade Luo Heaven, Fu Qingming suddenly felt a rush of impulse. He made a slight calculation and knew that fate had arrived. Now, he could send cultivators down to the lower realms. When the Yuhuan Heavens entered Bushu Heaven, they could avoid the demons and otherworldly demons in the void primordial sea. However, with Zhou Huanyuan Jade entering the world, the cultivators of the heavens would have to experience this calamity due to the entanglement of karma. Even if they hid in the Yuhuan Heavens now, they would still have to experience this in the future. Instead, it would accumulate and become impossible to escape. After making up his mind, he sent down a decree. It said that the cultivators of the Yuhuan Heavens could already move into the Kunshe continent to cultivate. Green Jade Palace's elder Pring quickly received the edict and invited Guan Longzhao and Feng Lan over. He showed the edict to the two of them and said, what do the two elders think of this? Guan Longzhao said, Palace Lord, do you mean for me to enter the world to impart cultivation? Feng Lan disagreed and said, imparting cultivation is not something that can be done in a short period of time. The people of the Kunshe continent are still in an alliance of tribes. Most of the people under them don't have enough food to fill their stomachs and clothes to cover their bodies. How many people can enter our sect? Once mortals entered Tao, whether they succeeded or not, they were usually separated from the secular world. The people of the tribes lived a hard life and were illiterate. How could they cultivate? Perhaps the upper echelons of the tribes who had accumulated enough private property could do so. However, cultivation was a big wave washing away the sand. There were very few of them. In the end, there were probably not many who could truly cultivate. This could not be called imparting cultivation. Elder Pengdaran said, "Then what does Elder Feng think?" Feng Lan said, "In my opinion, since Palace Lord wants to go to the continent to cultivate, then we should follow this plan. There is no need to think too much about other things. There are countless treasures and endless spiritual opportunities on the continent. It is a good place for us to cultivate. We can first occupy the blessed abode to prevent it from being taken over by those demons and evil monsters." Elder Peng stroked his beard and thought for a while. He said, "Then let's do this first." Not long after the three of them decided, the decree was sent down from the Green Jade Palace. Some cultivators who were quick-witted heard that it was the Lord's words and guessed that there might be some mystery here. Thus, they left the Yuhuan heavens and went to the Kuanshur continent. However, most of them saw that the demons and monsters on the continent were too powerful. They were afraid that their lives would be in danger if they went there. Thus, they would rather stay in their own worlds. Xianyuan Heaven, Qinghuan Palace. Zhang Yan suddenly sensed it. He also had the intention to calculate. He immediately ordered someone to summon Sun Shao and said, "You have cultivated by my side for many years and now have the cultivation of core formation. You have the ability to protect yourself. You can go to the continent to train. However, I expect that there will be a change in the human sex in the lower realm. If there is a person who says that he has lost his soul and comes to you to be his disciple, you can accept him." Sun Shao said, "Disciple obeys." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and a spiritual light fell into the acupuncture point between his eyebrows. He said, "Take this talisman to protect yourself. If you encounter a strong enemy, you can use this to escape." Sun Shao bowed again and bid farewell to his master. He left the Qinghuan Palace and went to the lower realm. Chapter 1755. In the past, when the Ying division interacted with the Zhao division, they would send envoys on flying spiritual birds. Even if they paid tribute, they could not bring many treasures. Thankfully, the Zhao division knew that this was not easy. They only needed the officials in name and did not place much importance on the rest of the treasures. But this time, it was different. They had sent a diplomatic mission over. Because the two places were extremely far apart, they had to travel for a year before they arrived at the mountain pass. Fortunately, this matter involved Yuan Zhen's grand plan. Along the way, they had the protection of Yuan Zhen's magic treasure, so they had no mishaps. When the Zhao division heard that the Ying division's envoys had arrived, they welcomed them with great gifts and held a banquet. Ding Ling and the 10 humanoid women were presented along with many treasures. Because of her beauty, Zhu Chao was deeply infatuated with her and immediately accepted her into his harem. From then on, he did not have the heart to care about the matters of the tribe. However, he had just ascended to the position of ruler, and the power was still in the hands of his clan members and his mother's clan. Other than Yin Chang, who was slightly worried, no one else cared. They were happy to see him like this. Also, the Zhao division was the leader of the tribes in name, but as long as it did not involve military matters, the Zhao king could not control other territories. Therefore, no matter how useless he was, he had nothing to do with the tribes. What happened in the past remained the same. 3 years later, Ding Ling gave birth to a child. Zhu Chao was overjoyed and named the child Suchong. He gave him the title of young master and decided that he would be the next ruler. Yet, just half a year later, a strange gust of wind blew into the Taichung Palace and swept the child away. When Zhu Chao heard this, he was shocked and furious. He issued an edict to the world that anyone who could find his child could be made a marquis. When this edict was made, countless people with special abilities, including those hidden within the Zhao nation, flooded into the imperial capital with their own goals. At the same time, It caused dissatisfaction among many tribes. At this moment, something seemed to be triggered. All the true young cultivators in Buxa Heaven, including the otherworldly demons in the void primordial sea, felt a strange sensation in their consciousnesses. Dan Yi immediately communicated with Zhang Yan and the other two. He said with certainty, "Friends, this is the sign of the birth of the primordial jade." The three nodded silently. However, the appearance of the origin jade did not mean that it would immediately appear. The origin jade might be placed in the hands of a fated person. Only when the heavens will arrive would it truly be seen by the people of this world. Therefore, finding these fated people just now was the key. After finding the bottom, if one could keep an eye on it, one might be able to successfully obtain the origin jade. Generally speaking, it was the safest way to recruit disciples. However, it wasn't as if they could just sit back and wait for the results after accomplishing such a thing. Most of these people had obsessions, and if they were killed or changed their minds, it was possible that variables would arise. Moreover, during this process, even if external forces were to interfere too much, they couldn't interfere too much. Otherwise, the fate of the heavens would disappear. Everyone understood that it was best to use the power of mortals to move it. Otherwise, it would only mess up the mysteries of the heavens, causing it to appear later and later, or it might not even appear at all. Just looking at the records on the jade strips that had been passed down, all of them proved this point. Danny said, "My human Tao is governed by the three Qian, so the origin jade must first be attracted by the human Tao. This fate of the heavens will fall on someone from the Zhao tribe." The reason why the four of them didn't allow the inner realm to move to the Kunshur continent was because of this consideration. Because once they did this, the number of living beings on the continent would suddenly increase. Not only would it confuse karma, but it would also cause more and more connections. At that time, no matter how powerful they were, it would be difficult to find all the fated people. At this moment, the entire Zhao tribe only had a bit more than 20 million people, and there was no cultivator who wouldn't wander around, so it was much easier to find them. It could be said that most of the arrangements they had made before were for this moment. Fu Qingming said, "Now we can order our disciples to find the fated person, but we also need to be wary of demons and other races." Michihito Ichido said, "The primordial demons are still okay. They have an agreement with me that they will only send their disciples to compete with me. I'm just afraid that the extraterrestrial demons and the Heartless sect will use some fierce means." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "He won't sit back and watch, but he definitely won't dare to risk universal condemnation and disturb the mysteries of heaven." When the extraterrestrial demons were fighting with the innate demons in the void primordial sea, he kept an eye on them. He knew that these demons had countless ways to exterminate living beings. It was the same even in Busu Tian. If all the living beings on the path to Kunshur continent died, and the fated person died, then Yuan Yu would naturally not appear again. However, if such a thing happened, then not only would it not be them, even Taoist priest Daoi would probably come and make things difficult for this person. As for the Heartless sect, for the same reason, they also did not dare to do so. Danny said, "If this person causes trouble, then we can only react accordingly. Whether we can obtain Yuan Yu or not, although it all depends on fate, if this thing is obtained by the demons, it will definitely be presented to Taoist priest Daoi. If he gains power, then no one in the world can compete with him. Therefore, even if I can't obtain it, I can't let it fall into the hands of the demons." Fu Qingming and Michihito Ichido both nodded. Although obtaining Zhou Huanyuan jade, Taoist priest Daoi might not be able to obtain the fruit of Wei, but as long as there was a chance, they must try to stop it. After the four of them came to an agreement, they each retreated from the divine will. When Zhang Yan opened his eyes, he happened to see a ray of spiritual light falling down to the lower bound. It was his eldest disciple Lu Yenyi, who had followed his instructions and went to Busu Tian. He nodded slightly. As long as Lu Yenyi and Sun Xiao followed his previous arrangements and followed the general trend, they would have a chance to wash away the karma and avoid the killing calamity. If their luck was not bad, they might even find a fated person. He understood that at the beginning of the Qianqi heaven calendar, there were not many living beings involved in the karma. This yuan yu was probably the easiest to obtain once, and the further it went, the more difficult it would be. However, even if the yuan yu was taken, this time it would not be the end of the karma. It would only accumulate and accumulate until the end of the calendar, when the karma would be settled. In fact, this was also related to the endless spiritual opportunities of Busu Tian and the countless treasures. The world could not feed endless living beings for nothing. When the spirits reached the extreme, there would be a calamity. From this point of view, the reverse of the world and the entry of the extraterrestrial demons into the world was also in line with the operation of the world, because they were part of the great Tao of heaven. As his thoughts turned to this point, his heart suddenly moved, as if he had faintly touched something, but this light flashed and disappeared. He wanted to search for it, but it was gone again. He raised his brows, but he did not continue to pursue it. Fate and Dharma could not be forced. When it should come, it would naturally come. Now that it was gone, it was just that the cultivation of the Dharma was not enough. At the same time, in the void primordial sea, in the netherworld, the three demon masters were also discussing countermeasures. Heng Jing said, "I didn't expect that Zhou Huanyuan Jade to enter the world so soon. Should we wait for a while longer, or should we send our disciples to fight for it now?" Qi Yao said, "Even though it depends on fate to get our hands on this item, some people say that Yuan Zun has been preparing for this day for a long time. If we enter the scene now, we definitely won't be able to win against them using normal methods. Only by messing up the situation can we have a chance." Ma Su said, "Is it with the art of heart demon?" Qi Yao said, "That's right. The art of heart demon has been used by me today, and now it has reached the highest level. Within the void primordial sea, if the demons do not practice the fundamental Dharma, there are few who can resist it. Now that the time has come, we can cast it into the Kuan-Shur continent." The art of heart demon usually only worked on cultivators, and there were almost no cultivators in the Kuan-Shur continent before, so it was useless to cast it in. However, it was different now. In order to search for the primordial stone, there would definitely be countless cultivators descending to the world. This was the best time for them to strike. If they were lucky, they might be able to use the other party to find that Zhou Huanyuan Jade. Deling Mountain, Gu Tribe. Under the crown bright tree, Jun Wuqi was sitting cross-legged on a huge rock and preaching Tao. Below him, there were more than 1,000 young men sitting around him, listening attentively. No one dared to miss a word. The method he was talking about was nothing more than some common methods to cast spells. Although the people who learned this method could not be considered as cultivators, at most they could be considered as magispriests. However, after the people of Gu tribe learned it, they would have an additional ability to fight against monsters and beasts. It was precisely because of the many magispriests he taught that the Gu tribe was able to expand the tribe's territory and continuously strengthen their forces. Because of this, his current status in the tribe was far above that of the tribe leader. However, as he was preaching, his vision suddenly darkened. He was shocked to find that he was standing in darkness, and opposite him stood a Taoist who was looking at him coldly. His body trembled, and he hurriedly went forward and knelt on the ground. He kowtowed and said, "Disciple greets Lord Dowie." Taoist Dowie glanced at him and said, "I ordered you to search for that primordial treasure. Have you found any clues now?" Jun Wuqi suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and replied, "For more than 100 years, Disciple has been searching everywhere, but I have not found it." He paused for a moment, then continued, "Disciple heard that Yuan Zun of the human Tao is also searching everywhere for this thing, but he also did not find anything." Taoist Dowie said coldly, "If you let this junior find it first, what use do I have for you?" Jun Wuqi repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Disciple is incompetent." Taoist Dowie snorted and softened his tone a little. He said, "Now that the heavenly fate has changed, the Zhou Huanyuan Jade may appear at any time. Since that treasure can't be found, let's put it aside for now. Try your best to find it." Jun Wuqi thought for a moment, then asked tentatively, "May I ask Lord Taoist, where should Disciple go to look for it?" Taoist Dowie said, "My divination ability can't be compared to those true young cultivators, so you need to look for it yourself. However, the human Dao tribe is very likely to be the place where the Yuan jade appeared this time. You can go to Zhaoyuan first to investigate. After a pause, he added, "Oh, you also need to pay more attention to the tribe you are in. Don't miss it." Jun Wuchi bowed again and said, "Yes, disciple will do my best to repay Lord Taoist." When he looked up again, he found that he had returned to the big rock. He knew that Taoist Daoi's consciousness had left and was not in the mood to preach. So, he waved his sleeve and said, "Today's lecture ends here. All of you can leave now." The thousands of youths didn't know what was going on, but no one dared to question him. They looked at each other, then stood up, bowed respectfully to him, and left. Jun Wuchi looked up at the sky and sighed. After a little divination, he left a letter behind and soared into the sky, heading in the direction of the royal capital. Chapter 1756. In the capital of Zhaoyuan, on the road leading to Taichung Palace, there were two Taoists walking as if there was no one around them. The guards on the high platform did not seem to see anything. These two people were Qi Wu and Ai Shang. They were both rogue cultivators of Yuhuan heavens and Ishu heavens. Generally speaking, due to the difficulty of cultivation, it was not easy to obtain skills or external medicine. It was extremely rare for a rogue cultivator with profound skills to appear. However, the Yuhuan heavens had a system of karma points. Even if one did not enter the sect, as long as one made karma points, one would be able to obtain everything one wanted. Therefore, there were many people who were not successful in the sect or felt that they were too restricted, so they simply broke the door and left. And these two people were the same. There were many people like them who had entered the Kunshe continent. Qi Wu looked at the scenery around him and said with disdain, "This is the capital of Zhao country? In Yuhuan heavens, even the mortal world is 100 times more prosperous than this place." Ai Shang smiled, "But the spiritual opportunity is far from here. Moreover, there are many treasures here that cannot be found in Yuhuan heavens." Qi Wu said, "I heard that the monarch was swept away by the demon wind. In the palace, there are many treasures. With our divination ability, as long as we can find this person, I believe the monarch will not be stingy with the treasures." Ai Shang agreed deeply. Just as they were talking, suddenly they saw a cloud of black smoke coming down from the sky toward the grand palace. Their expressions suddenly turned solemn. From the aura, it was not difficult to see that the incomer was a demon with considerable cultivation. If it was in the Yuhuan heavens, it would be able to fight against a cultivator who had cultivated a nascent soul body. The two of them were not a match for it. But at this moment, there was a sound of chains. A celestial man appeared in the sky. The huge pestle in his hand fell and a miserable howl was heard. Then, a flying leopard with flesh wings fell from the clouds. The two of them looked at each other and hurriedly leaped into midair to look down. The monster was already chained by the celestial man and was lying there powerlessly. Qi Wu saw this scene and said with concern, "I heard that these mortal tribes have gods guarding them. We can't mess around." The corner of Ai Shang's mouth twitched. "If that's the case, then we don't have to go to the grand palace anymore." Qi Wu nodded again and again. Even such a great demon was easily captured. Then, the person who could easily take the young master of the country away was either someone that even the gods couldn't catch, or there was some other karma involved, so he was left alone. If that was the case, then it was definitely not something they could get involved in. At this moment, not only did the two of them extinguish the thought from before, they didn't even want to stay here for a moment longer. They turned around and fled in another direction. At this moment, they weren't the only ones. All the cultivators who witnessed this scene could tell that the waters here were too deep, and all of them either stayed away or retreated. At this moment, in the northwest area of Cheong Mountain, a clear light flowed down like the Milky Way and reached the land. It hovered at a height of 10 feet and did not fall. There was only the sound of flowing water. All the water gathered in one place and instantly turned into a ball of amber crystal jade. After a while, there were ripples in it. Lu Yinyi, dressed in white, pushed aside the water-like brilliance and appeared. She made a little calculation and after determining the direction, she fled to the east. But she didn't go far. the sun in the sky flashed, and a beam of essence fell. Then, a golden-armored deity who was driving a dragon carriage appeared not far from her side. He bowed respectfully and said, "Sun Star official Zhu Zhu greets Shangzhen Xianxiao. I wonder if Shangzhen has any instructions for this little deity?" In the Kunshe continent, except for the unborn divine Lord Guiyang, there were 36 sun star gods under him. They didn't belong to each other, and this area was guarded by this Zhu Zhu. If other cultivators came to the lower realm, he wouldn't pay much attention to them. But Lu Yinyi was different. She was the eldest disciple of Lord Xianyuan and a Shangzhen master who had shed his mortal body. Even the divine Lord Zhao Heng had to treat her with respect. But now that she appeared in the area he was on duty, he had to take the initiative to greet her. When Lu Yinyi saw this person, she pondered for a moment. She felt that this person had been visiting the continent for many years, so he should be more familiar with it than she was. Thus, she politely said, "Thank you for asking, Star Official. I wish to find a place behind Lucio to establish a Taoist right ground. Does Star Official know of a suitable place?" Lucio was to the east of Zhaoyuan. It turned out that after the human sects were driven out of Zhaoyuan, they migrated all the way to the east. But further east, there was an ancient forest that covered the sun. It could be said that ferocious beasts and monsters were everywhere. There were countless strange mountains and ridges, and there were very few intelligent creatures. Zhu Zhu didn't dare to casually say a place. After thinking carefully, he said, "If Shangzhen wants to find a dojo, go 1,800,000 miles to the east. There is a name given by the Divine Lord by Mang Mountain. It is a suitable place." Lu Yinyi said, "Since there is a name given by the Divine Lord, is there a spirit of the mountains and rivers inside?" Zhu Zhu was about to speak, but he paused for a moment. Then he showed a happy expression and said, "Shangzhen, just now, the Divine Lord has spread the word that if Shangzhen likes that place, you can do whatever you want with the mountain spirit. You can make it your slave or kill it." Lu Yinyi thought for a while and said, "Star Official, please lead the way." Zhu Zhu cupped his fists and said, "Shangzhen Xianxiao, please follow me." He pushed away the two dragons in front of the carriage and his body suddenly turned into a golden light. As the Star Official on duty, as long as his light reached the place, he could arrive in an instant. Lu Yinyi, as a mortal metamorphosis cultivator, felt the presence of the aura and immediately moved to the place. Zhu Zhu said, "Shangzhen Xianxiao, please take a look. What the Divine Lord said is this place." Lu Yinyi looked down. It was a basin, and the surroundings were decorated with jade mountains. The mountains here were plain, and the water was like a crystal spring. It could not be called magnificent, but it was exceptionally exquisite. She could feel that there was a spiritual fetus in the mountain, and inside it was a woman hugging her knees as if she was in a deep sleep. She assumed that it was the mountain spirit of vast white mountain. She thought for a while and said, "This place is very suitable, thank you for your guidance." Zhu Zhu was flattered by her thanks and quickly said, "Not at all, as long as Shangzhen is satisfied." He was also tactful and said, "If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Lu Yinyi nodded lightly. After Zhu Zhu bowed, he turned around and the dragons in front of the carriage turned into a golden light and returned to the great sun in the sky. Lu Yinyi looked down for a while and gently guided her mana. Suddenly, a river of water came down from the sky and gushed down. Although the place was suitable, it was formed naturally after all. Most of the spiritual vigor was taken up by the mountains, rivers, and trees. Therefore, she had to make some changes and set up a formation board to gather more spiritual vigor here. Under her efforts, within a few days, the basin was completely transformed into a clear lake. Below it was a crystal jade palace. Because the mountain spirit was not born yet, she did not pay much attention to it. She walked into the palace and sat down in a lotus position. Because the first thing that Zhang Yan told her was that she had not come into contact with the enemy in the next half a year. Therefore, she had to try her best to maintain a perfect qi dynamic. She meditated for more than 100 days. When she came out of the meditative state, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She felt that there was a foreign object in her mind, and it seemed to appear out of nowhere. Her expression was slightly solemn. She immediately picked up a technique and with a change of chi dynamic, she suppressed the foreign object. After confirming that she had eliminated it, she thought, "This is the heart demon that is wreaking havoc in the void and the various realms of the primordial sea. It is really hard to guard against. Fortunately, I have the technique that my teacher taught me. Otherwise, it would be difficult to suppress it." The innate demons and the extraterritorial demons had been fighting for more than 100 years. However, they did not have many ways to deal with the heart demon technique. They could only chant the treasure spirit incantation and the heart tranquility incantation to protect and avoid it. As for the dispelling demon incantation, it was not impossible. However, only those with superior cultivation could use it. Therefore, they were forced to take a defensive stance. However, the secret technique that Zhang Yan taught her was different. He was the Qizhou demon master. He could see every movement of the demons and even the changes of Dao techniques. There was no secret at all. Therefore, he could naturally use the corresponding secret technique to restrain them. After Lu Yenyi calculated it, she knew that it was time for her to make a move. For the sake of preventing someone from intruding into this place while she wasn't here, she activated the restriction formation to envelop the surroundings of this area in mist before soaring into the sky. On the map of the various human sects, there was a vast and boundless sea to the north of Zhaoyuan. The various sects called it the Dawn Sea. However, if one looked down from the sky, there were actually hundreds of lakes and seas in the north. The Dawn Sea just happened to be at the side of Zhaoyuan. However, if one looked to the extreme north, there was a sea abyss in the boundless sea. An immeasurable amount of seawater sank there as if there was a huge mouth swallowing it. On this day, there was a surge of chi dynamic in the water abyss. A golden dragon soared up and in the blink of an eye, it turned into Daoran. He looked like a living person, but there were pale white tentacles hanging down his chin. His eyes were gloomy and his face was filled with ferocity. He looked to the south and was about to move. However, a clear and pleasant voice came from the sky. "Sir, please stop." The old man was shocked. He looked to the sky and saw a female celestial standing there. There was a jade lotus under her feet. A ray of sword light spun around like a silver rainbow. He said in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Lu Yenyi said indifferently, "Sir, you don't need to ask about my identity. Now that the calendar has changed, if you don't come out, you can still keep your life. However, if you insist on going ashore, it will be difficult to keep your life." The old man's expression became even more gloomy. He said, "You know who I am?" Lu Yenyi nodded slightly and said, "Sir, you were once a protector under Danshan Yuanzun. It is because you know this identity that I came to persuade you to go back." The person in front of her was an old dragon that had lived since the last era. The person behind him, Danshan Yuanzun, was lucky enough to obtain a Zhou Huanyuan jade in the first era when human path wasn't stable. Although he succeeded in the end, he was still destroyed by a powerful person of human path. His last bit of essence fell into the abyss. However, if he could find another Zhou Huanyuan jade, he might be able to return it. However, according to Zhang Yan's calculations, if Danshan came back to life, then in the future, countless living beings would die because of him. Lu Yenyi would be one of them. Therefore, he ordered her to come and personally get rid of this hidden danger. The old man's eyes flickered. As if he had heard the persuasion, he turned around and walked into the abyss. Lu Yenyi just watched silently. However, just as the person was about to sink into the water, his figure suddenly flashed and disappeared. Lu Yenyi sighed softly. A ray of sword light slashed out, and she instantly escaped into the void. Just now, the old man appeared in another place. Before he could rejoice, a ray of sword light suddenly leaped out. It circled in the air and immediately cut off his head. Then, his body exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood that rained down. In Lu Yenyi's palm, a talisman abruptly turned into a wisp of green smoke and flew away. With the help of the talisman given to her by Zhang Yan, she was able to figure out the opponent's background in a flash and easily killed a peer of the same generation. At this moment, she felt her mind lighten up slightly, and it was like she'd been freed from something. She instantly understood that she'd severed some of her future karma, and she would be able to cleanse all of it and escape from the tribulation. Chapter 1757. Lu Yenyi gazed at the bottomless abyss. Although she had killed the old dragon, as long as the wisp of essence chi remained, the mighty figure would definitely find a way to return to the world. However, this was not something she could interfere with. In reality, killing the future calamity did not mean that she would definitely be able to avoid all the calamities. That would only eliminate the one that posed the greatest threat to her in the future. From this aspect, what she was doing now was only reducing the danger, but not completely eliminating it. If she truly wanted to avoid it, she would have to become a true yang cultivator. Then, aside from her peers or those in the upper realm, no external force could shake her. However, when she thought about this, she could not help but worry about her fellow sect members. This time, the appearance of the Zhou Huanyuan Jade was limited to the human Dao domain, so it was actually much easier for her to cleanse herself of the karmic calamity. However, if she did not enter the world this time, she would have to wait until the next time the Origin Jade appeared. At that time, it would be even more difficult to avoid being killed. Fortunately, her master was there, and they must have their own arrangements. There was no point in thinking too much at the moment. She collected her thoughts, turned her chi, and fled back to Whitemon Mountain. According to Zhang Yan's calculations, the next person connected to her by karma might appear in 10 years. This person's strength was about the same as hers, and she had already used up her talisman. She could only rely on her own strength to deal with it. Although it looked like there was still some time, for cultivators, it was only the blink of an eye. She had to make preparations as soon as possible. The night was cold and silent, and the stars shone brightly. Sun Shao stood on a mound, moving his gang chi and nailing the jade stakes into the ground. After arriving in the Kunshi continent, he did not wander around aimlessly. Instead, he chose a place near Sky Mountain to settle down. Although Zhang Yan had asked him to come here to accept a disciple, it did not mean that he would do nothing. If he left the human Dao domain, no matter how fated he was, it would be difficult for this disciple to cross the mountains and rivers to come to him. In reality, with his current cultivation, he could not establish himself in such a place. On the other hand, Sky Mountain was the safest place because some powerful monsters and beasts had been wiped out by the divine spirits. On the surface, it seemed as if everything had been arranged for him. However, the truth was that his cultivation base was insufficient, and he had very few choices to make. Generally speaking, the future changes of low-level cultivators were relatively simple. However, the higher one's cultivation level was, the more choices they could make, and the more complex the variables in the future would be. It was like a thread that stretched out endlessly. In the beginning, there was only one thread, but as time passed, it gradually spread out, becoming more and more numerous. The more it tangled, the messier it became, until it was a myriad of threads that were difficult to sort out. After burying all the jade pillars into the ground, he took out a talisman and activated his mana. In an instant, he propped up a large formation that was overflowing with spiritual light. After doing all this, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. There were simply too many powerful beings on the Kunshi continent, and with this restriction, they would be able to protect themselves for the time being. They wouldn't have to live in constant fear. Speaking of which, he somewhat admired the human Dao tribes. Before the gods were established, they were actually able to struggle and survive in such a dangerous place. It was truly not easy. At this time, he saw meteors piercing through the sky. Many of them were clearly coming this way. He thought to himself, recently, more and more cultivators have entered the Kunshi continent. In these days, many cultivators had built caves near Sky Mountain like him. However, these people were different from him. They did not know about the Zhou Huanyuan Jade. The reason they came here was because they had their eyes on the treasures that the bright tribe had gathered. Suddenly, his vision blurred. It was a strange two-headed bird that flashed above his head. Before he could see clearly, they disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He couldn't help but chuckle. After coming here, he realized that he had a shortcoming, and that was that his flying speed was too slow. In the past, he didn't need to fly much between the state capital and celestial stopping mountain. Even if he went to the northern cold abyss, there was a transfer formation. However, on the Kunsher continent, it was different. He could only rely on flying to go anywhere. This not only consumed a lot of mana, but it also wasted time. However, these were only secondary. He realized that on this continent, all beings that could fly were faster than him. This meant that if he encountered an enemy, if he couldn't defeat them, he might not even be able to escape. Although he had the protective talisman given to him by his master, he couldn't rely on it every time. After realizing this, he felt that he had to find a leg support. Because he couldn't improve his cultivation in a short period of time, he turned his attention to the native beings. However, the monsters and beasts here were all abnormally strong, so it wasn't easy to make a move on them. Now that the restriction had been set up, he could start doing this. He made a hand seal and expanded the restrictive formation. It slowly extended upwards and enveloped the entire hillside. Then, he took out a medicinal pill from his sleeve and tossed it into the stream below. After that, he didn't bother with it anymore. After cultivating for a few days, he suddenly heard a roar at noon, and he soared into the sky to look over. He saw a majestic cloud treading white lion trapped within the restriction, and it was charging left and right within the formation. Every time it collided with the formation, it would shake the formation to the point it shook endlessly. He couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. The white lion was an extremely rare spirit beast on the Kunsher continent. It could fly and hide, and it also had a bit of intelligence. He was lucky to be able to trap it this time. It must have been attracted here because it couldn't resist the temptation of the pill from his master. It wasn't easy to tame such a creature unless it was tamed from a cub. However, he didn't need to go through this. He stretched out his hand and took out a jade ring from his sleeve. This was the beast-subduing collar that he summoned from the disciples of the Blue Feather Pavilion with a lot of spirit shells. As long as it was a bird or a beast, once it fell, it could only be restrained. He had never used it before, so he didn't know if it was effective or not. After calming his mind, he threw the jade ring over. As a spiritual light flew over, it instantly trapped the cloud-treading white lion. At the same time, he hurriedly chanted the beast-taming technique. After a moment, the white lion calmed down from its irritation. Then, it obediently lay there and didn't move at all. It is indeed useful. Sun Zhao's spirit was lifted. He walked forward and carefully looked at the white lion. He reached out his palm and stroked its hair. The spirit beast let out a purr and leaned over to please him. He smiled and flipped up, sitting on its back. The white lion straightened its body and moved its four claws as if it was climbing mountains. With a wave of smoke, it had already leaped into the sky. Sun Zhao sat on its back and looked down into the mountains and rivers. He couldn't help but feel happy. With this spirit beast as a mount, it would be convenient to go anywhere. After circling around in high spirits, he discovered that the night had passed and the sky was bright. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard the sound of chanting. At first it was indistinct, but soon it became clear and continuously squeezed into his mind. He couldn't help but frown. The scripture clearly contradicted what he'd learned, but it just so happened that it contained many truths of the Grand Tao, causing him to be unable to help but want to listen. He instinctively felt that there was something wrong with this, so he hurriedly circulated his mental cultivation method and immediately expelled the sound of the scripture, not leaving a trace of it in his heart. Only then did he look in the direction of the sound. The person chanting was a middle-aged Taoist. His hair was tied in a high bun and he wore a golden Taoist robe. As he chanted, the surrounding cultivators who lived in huts walked out one by one and knelt around him. One of them said excitedly, "Today, after hearing the Taoist, I finally understand the wonderful truths of the Great Tao. What I learned in the past is useless. Please have mercy and accept us lost people as your disciples." The middle-aged Taoist said calmly, "My Tao can be crossed by anyone who is fated. Since you are willing to join my sect, you are fellow Taoists." He took out a jade chain from his sleeve and handed it over. "Accept this and you will be my disciple." The young cultivator did not hesitate to wear it. The Taoist smiled and said to everyone, "You can also come along." The cultivators were overjoyed and kowtowed repeatedly. The Taoist then said to the direction of Cheong Mountain, "I have the method of immortality in my hands. I am now on Mount Mei, 1,000 miles away. If you want to seek the Tao, you can come here and worship me." Although his voice was calm, it was extremely grand. In an instant, it spread throughout the entire Zhaoyuan. All the people of the tribe heard it clearly and were very surprised. They suspected that a god had descended. The Taoist glanced at where Cao Shao was. His eyes flickered, but he didn't do anything else. He waved his sleeves and a gust of wind swept up everyone. Then he flew off into the sky. Cao Shao couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw Chen Shi leave. This person's vital energy seemed to be different, and his cultivation far surpassed Cao Zhao's. If they were to fight, then Cao Shao would absolutely be no match for Chen Shi. Cao Shao glanced at the surroundings once more, yet all the abodes were empty, and he was probably the only cultivator left in the surroundings after this. He felt that it was not safe to stay outside. He thought for a moment and patted the white jade lion. He quickly returned to the cave, then activated all the restrictions and focused on cultivation. Before he knew it, another 2 cycles passed. On this day, at the foot of the mountain, a group of armored soldiers escorted a luxurious carriage pulled by 8 horses. In the carriage sat a young man with a short beard and a 9-feathered crown on his head. A servant came to the front of the carriage and reported, "Young Master Shuai, the mountain road ahead is rugged. It is not a carriage that can go up. Do you need to call someone to report?" Young Master Shuai said, "Since you have come to seek immortality, you must be sincere. I will personally pay a visit." As he spoke, he got out of the carriage and cupped his hands to an old man dressed like a magus priest. He said, "Thank you for waiting here." The old man said arrogantly, "Clan leader, do you really want to go up? We can also call the wind and summon the rain. Why do we need to ask these so-called immortals?" Young Master Shuai smiled and did not argue with him. Ever since the Taoist appeared 2 years ago, more and more strange rumors spread. It was said that this person was an immortal. He could live forever, consume pills, eat qi, and roam freely between heaven and earth. He was very clear about the abilities of a magus priest. But immortals could live forever and heal people. Such methods were not something the former could do. After young Master Shuai went up the mountain, he walked for more than an hour with a group of servants. Just now they had reached the peak. However, the servant beside him said, "Young Master, there is no road ahead." Young Master Shuai looked and saw fog and clouds in front of him. He could not see the bottom. It was a cliff. He thought for a moment and cupped his hands to the front. He said loudly, "May I ask if the immortal is here? I am young Master Shuai of the Qi tribe. Today, I admire your immortal appearance and come to pay a visit." After a while, a clear voice said, "Guest, please come up the mountain." Chapter 1758. Young Master Shuai saw that the cliff in front of him had suddenly revealed a mountain path. He had never seen such a method before. Now that he saw it, he couldn't help but be surprised. One of the attendants beside him didn't seem to believe it. He went up and stomped on it a few times. After confirming that it was solid ground, he said, "Young Master, it's doable." Young Master Shuai nodded. He could confirm that the person on the mountain was really capable. The group of people went up the mountain path. Not long after, they turned around a large stone. In front of them was a flat land of 5 acres. This place was against a mountain wall. Above it was a waterfall that flowed down and converged into a pool at the bottom. Not far away, there was a small pavilion that could shelter from the rain. 100 steps to the right, there was a high cliff. Between the trees, they could vaguely see a hut. Young Master Shuai came here and looked around. He felt that the air here was especially fresh. After taking a few breaths, he felt refreshed. He couldn't help but praise, "It really is a land of immortals." He became excited and quickly walked towards the direction of the high cliff. He followed the mountain path and turned up to the hut. However, after a few glances, he found that this place was already at the top of the mountain. There seemed to be nowhere else to go. He cupped his fists and asked, "Is the master here?" After a moment, a voice came from inside. "Young Master Shuai, please come in and talk." Young Master Shuai heard that this was the voice of the immortal and couldn't help but feel strange. He looked around and didn't expect the immortal in the legends to live in such a simple place. He hesitated for a moment and thought that the hut looked small and might not be able to accommodate too many people. So, he turned around and said that except for one attendant, the rest of the guards stayed outside. He then lifted the curtain and entered. However, just now that he was inside, he couldn't help but be absent-minded. The outside was clearly a hut, but when he entered, he found that it was actually a wide hall. At the end of the hall, there was a young cultivator standing on a high platform. He wore a green robe with ripples on it. Beside him was a white lion. In front of him was a purple gold incense burner. Green smoke curled up and a strange fragrance assailed his nostrils. Young Master Shuai composed himself and went forward to bow. He said, "Are you the immortal here?" Sin Shao said in a clear voice, "I don't dare to be called an immortal, I'm just a Taoist cultivator." He gestured to the side. "Guest, please sit down." The young master thanked him and walked up to the stage. He sat down on the guest seat, but his eyes couldn't help but glance at the white jade lion that was right in front of him. He felt a little restless. Facing such a huge beast, no one would dare to remain calm. The attendant beside him also had a nervous expression, as if he was afraid that the beast would pounce on him. Sin Shao smiled and said, "The two of you need not be afraid. This is my mount. Without my orders, it will not harm outsiders." Young Master Shuai relaxed a little and praised, "Celestial can tame such a ferocious beast, you really have great mana." Sin Shao smiled and opened his sleeve. Smoke rose from the hall and 2 lotus leaf cups floated over. There were 2 exquisite white porcelain teacups. After they came over, they landed in front of the host and guest respectively and said, "Young Master Shuai, please enjoy." Young Master Shuai had seen wind and rain before, but he had never seen such a small art. He felt it was rather novel. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. The tea was tasteless at first, then he suddenly felt a sweet fragrance permeate the top of his head, as if he was soaked in warm water. After a long time, he heaved a sigh of relief and praised, "Good tea." Sin Shao said, "This is spiritual tea that I personally planted. It's not something rare. If you like it, you can pick some before you leave." Young Master Shuai thanked him. Perhaps he felt that Sin Zhao's temperament was gentle and not someone who was difficult to talk to, so he tried to ask, "Immortal, did you come from the upper bound?" Sin Shao said, "You can say that." Young Master Shuai's expression became excited and he continued to ask, "Then what position do you have under the Almighty, Immortal?" Sin Shao shook his head and said, "We Taoist cultivators respect heaven and earth as our teachers, but not the gods." Young Master Shuai's eyes widened slightly. Other than worshipping heaven and earth and the 4 Tao lords, the human path tribes also worshipped the Almighty. They had never come into contact with Taoist cultivators before. Therefore, it was generally believed that regardless of immortals or gods, they were all under the control of the Almighty. Only now did he know that there was no connection between them. He asked curiously, "Then do you have a master above you, immortal?" Sin Shao said, "Every sect and path has their own origins. It's hard to say for now, but usually, the 4 Tao lords are the masters." Young Master Shuai said, "Then have you ever seen the 4 Tao lords?" Sin Shao smiled and did not answer. Young Master Shuai saw that he did not say anything, so he did not ask further. He thought for a while and said, 2 years ago, there was an immortal who came to Cheong Mountain and said that he was staying at Mei Mountain. I wonder how his ability is compared to immortal?" Sin Shao thought for a while and said, "This person has remarkable abilities, I can't compare to him. However, this person's cultivation is not orthodox, so I won't take him." Young Master Shuai said, "Orthodox?" Sin Shao said, "I'm afraid young Master Shuai does not understand the mysteries of this place. I can only tell you that this person does not worship the 4 Tao lords, but has another belief. So that's how it is." Young Master Shuai's expression turned solemn. This time, he came with a purpose. Originally, he thought that if he hit a wall here, he would go to that mountain to try his luck, but now he dispelled that idea. He did not know anything about orthodox Taoism, but he knew that those who did not worship the four Tao lords were definitely not on the same path as him. It would be fine if he did not know, but now that he knew, if he went forward, it would be disrespectful to the Tao lords, and it would bring disaster to the tribe. Sun Shao said, "What brings you here, sir?" Young Master Shuai deliberated over his words and said, "This time I have come here for two matters. One is to ask about longevity, and the other is to ask about illness." Sun Shao nodded to himself. Most people would ask for these, and he was not surprised. He said, "I do have the method of longevity here, but it is not easily taught. If young master is asking about illness, if it is not someone who has reached the end of his life, there are pills that can save him." Young Master Shuai heard his confirmation, and his spirit was lifted. He hurriedly said, "I have a younger brother who was born intelligent. When he was 8, he was sent to the imperial capital as a hostage. But a few years ago, there was a strange wind in the imperial capital. Not only did young Master Shuai disappear, even my younger brother fainted because of it. When he woke up 10 days later, he did not know his friends and parents, and did not know his family name. Until now, there is no cure." When he finished, he sighed. Sun Zhao's heart moved slightly and he thought, did not know his friends and parents, and did not know his family name. Could it be that person who lost his soul? But then he thought of another possibility. From what young Master Shuai said, there seems to be someone else who has this illness other than young Master's younger brother? Young Master Shuai thought for a while and said, "There are many people in the tribe. Among the officials that I know, there are also 2 or 3 people who have this strange illness. I heard that the hostages of the other tribes also have similar things." Sun Shao understood. It seemed that this person might not be the main cause, but nothing could be certain. There was no harm in taking a look. So he said, "It is still difficult to determine the cause of your younger brother's illness. The only way is to send your younger brother here, and after I take a look, I will know." When young Master Shuai heard this, he stood up excitedly and said, "If Immortal Elder can cure him, I will repay you with everything I have. If there is anything you want, I will do it." After knowing that there was hope for his younger brother to be cured, he absent-mindedly chatted for a while, then hurriedly left the mountain and rushed back to the imperial capital. Then he used a large sum of money to bribe the guards to pick up his younger brother, and then personally sent him up the mountain. This place was not far from Cheong Mountain. Under normal circumstances, the journey back and forth would only take 3 days. In addition, he sent him on a fast horse, and by noon of the second day, he had already sent him and carried him into the main hall. Sun Shao took a look. The other was only a teenager of about 10 years old. Looking at his appearance, he should have been intelligent, but at this moment he was leaning on a rattan chair. His eyes were lifeless, saliva dripped from his mouth, and his limbs were limp and powerless. He looked stupid, as if his mind had been damaged. With one look, he knew that this was not some kind of demonic magic, but some kind of external pollution. He stretched out his finger and pointed, and a wisp of smoke entered his body. After a while, he had an idea of what was going on, and he withdrew his hand. Young Master Shuai asked anxiously, "Immortal Elder, how is it?" Sun Shao said, "Your younger brother's spiritual acupoints have been blocked by evil energy, causing his mind to be blinded. When I refine a pill, it will be able to clear the obstruction and restore his mind." Young Master Shuai was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, Immortal Elder." Sun Shao turned to the back room of the cave and took out a small furnace. He took out some pill powder and sprinkled it into the furnace. Then he circulated his mana and used the fire in his palm to refine it. He wasn't trying to fool the other, but the pill in his hand was for cultivators to consume, so its medicinal power was great. It couldn't be used on mortals, so he had to refine it again. After a short while, he came out and came before the teenager. He grabbed a golden pill in his palm, then pressed it on the space between the teenager's eyebrows, and the pill went inside. Young Master Shuai watched on in amazement. He found it hard to believe that such a big pill could be sent into a person's body. Sun Shao checked the teenager's chi meridian, and said, "He's fine now. Young Master Shuai can bring him to the side hall to rest." After he wakes up, he will regain his clarity. Young Master Shuai repeatedly thanked him, then ordered someone to bring his younger brother down. Then he sat down and waited. For hours later, a servant ran over and whispered in his ear. Young Master Shuai's body trembled and he stood up. He bowed deeply and said excitedly, "My younger brother has regained his consciousness. I'm here to thank you." Sun Shao said, "It's nothing." Young Master Shuai solemnly promised, "This is a great favor. When we return, we will present a great gift to you." From now on, no matter what immortal elder needs, just say the word, and the people of the contract division will do our best to fulfill it. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Immortal elder, my younger brother can't leave the capital yet. When he's fine, if someone asks, how should I answer?" Sun Zhao's mind turned. Although those who were infected by the evil aura might not be the disciples he was waiting for, if the reputation of being able to solve doubts spread, it would be beneficial. It might even lead the person in question out. So, he said, "You can tell me the truth." At the same time, on Mount Mei hundreds of miles away, a middle-aged Taoist frowned. He counted with his fingers, and his face darkened. He sneered, "I saw that you weren't enlightened by the fundamental scriptures, so I didn't want to provoke you. I didn't expect you to ruin my plans. Looks like I can't let you live." With a shake of his body, he was already above the clouds, turning into the wind and heading toward the small hill. Chapter 1759. The middle-aged Taoist followed the Qi and instantly arrived at the mound where Sun Shao lived. However, as the place was shrouded by the Prohibition Formation, everything was covered in fog and nothing could be seen clearly. He snorted and activated his mana. In an instant, his mana materialized and pressed down like a falling mountain. He initially thought that if he attacked, he would definitely be able to flatten the boundary. In order not to affect the boundary of the human path and attract unnecessary trouble, he purposely held back. However, when the mana pressed on the mist, there were only layers of ripples. After a long while, it returned to normal. He looked at it in shock and said, "Formation?" He was originally a demon native of the Kunsher continent who attained Tao. Previously, he heard from the person who taught him that cultivators with human bodies were good at operating Prohibition Formation. However, he had never seen it before. Today, he finally encountered it. Based on what he knew, Prohibition Formation usually borrowed spiritual opportunity from the Earth Meridian. If one wanted to attack it head-on, unless one could break the formation in one blow, one could only try to exhaust or weaken the surrounding spiritual opportunity. Just now, he could break it. Hence, he calculated and felt that it would inevitably take some effort to remove this formation. However, since he was here, he would not go back so easily without achieving his goal. He sneered and waved his sleeves above the clouds. Then he started chanting scriptures. He was originally a bird that entered Tao. Hence, when he started chanting, the spiritual birds that passed by the sky were affected by the scriptures. Instantly, their minds went into a mess and they were attracted to him. Then, they crashed into the Prohibition Formation crazily. In an instant, their flesh and blood were smashed and the sky was filled with feathers. At this moment, Sun Shao was talking to young Master Shuai. The latter heard the rumbling outside as though thunder was right beside his ears. He was shocked and asked, "What's going on outside?" Sun Shao, on the other hand, was calm and said, "Someone is attacking my cave abode with mana." What? Young Master Shuai was shocked. He suddenly stood up and said, "Who dares to do this? Could it be a different species of fierce demon in the wilderness?" Sun Shao comforted him, "Young Master Shuai, there's no need to panic. This place of mine is protected by a forbidden formation. Without my permission, no matter how this person attacks, he won't be able to enter in a short time." The jade stake he had brought with him had been refined from the earth-fire heavenly furnace of the Qinsong school, and was specifically designed to defend against greater demons of the mountains and seas. Even if the opponent had the magical power of the mammoth level, the jade stake would still be able to defend against it, unless his cultivation base was at the level of mortalhood. Of course, if his opponent had such magical power, he wouldn't be sitting here so calmly. Young Master Shui didn't know what a restriction formation was, but seeing his calm expression, he slowly calmed down. Sun Shao said, "There are enemies here and Shao has to go deal with them. I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of young Master Ling for a while." Young Master Shui heard this and understood that this kind of battle formation was a fight between immortals. It wasn't something he could get involved in. He quickly said, it's all right. He then bowed and excused himself. When he arrived at the side hall, he saw that his brother had already woken up. He asked a few questions, and his brother spoke clearly like a normal person. He couldn't help but feel happy, but at the same time, he was worried that if Sun Shao couldn't defend against the enemy, then the people on his side would lose their lives. But at the moment, he was powerless to do anything and could only wait anxiously. Although Sun Shao had only cultivated for a little over 100 years, he still had memories from his previous life. When he was in charge of the sect of the Deep Caves, he had single-handedly supported the entire sect. During this time, he had experienced countless dangerous situations. So even though he was in trouble now, he wasn't the least bit flustered. He calmly went to the inner room. After sitting on the cattail hassock, he pressed his thumb and forefinger together and a water mirror appeared. With just a shake, it reflected the scene outside. When he saw the appearance of the person, he immediately recognized that this was the middle-aged Taoist who was chanting the scriptures the other day. He thought that there were no grudges between them. But since this person had come to fight, there must be a reason. Now, the main thing was to deal with this matter first. Seeing that the other party was controlling countless birds to attack the formation, one look and he knew that the other party was trying to exhaust the spiritual vigor in the formation. But this formation was set up as the formation of the Zhongshan Gate. If it was so easily broken, how would he dare to stay here? But there was still a hidden danger here. He could deal with it now, but if the other party saw that ordinary methods could not break it, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't use other methods. He had to consider the worst-case scenario. He pondered for a while. Because of the difference in skills, if the formation was broken, then he could only use the talisman given by his master to escape. But he was ordered to come here by his master to wait for the fated person. If he used the talisman, he could escape, but he couldn't stay here anymore. But if that happened, he might not be able to fulfill his master's instructions. In other words, if he didn't want to return empty-handed, he couldn't retreat now. He understood that his master had sent him to the lower realm to find something, and at the same time, to wash away the karma that might be involved with him in the future. If that was the case, this might be the tribulation that he had to go through. Thinking of this, his expression slowly turned serious. He took out a stone ball from his sleeve and placed it on the center of the formation. With this object, he could at least reduce the external force by 30%. This way, he would be able to hold on for a longer time. At this moment, in the sky, two deities appeared. The golden armor heavenly general on the left said, "Star official Yuchan, this cultivator seems to have come from Xianyuan heaven. Maybe he has some relationship with Lord Xianyuan. Should we help him?" Star official Yuchan said coldly, "This person is not in the human Dao domain, so he is not under our jurisdiction. We can only depend on his luck." The golden armor heavenly general said, "I see that this formation is very strong. The evil cultivator can't do anything to it. When his strength is exhausted, he will retreat." Star official Yuchan said, "Although the formation is strong, it is still a dead object. As long as there is no way to counter it, it can only be used by the enemy. Since this evil cultivator can summon these ferocious birds, he can also find other helpers. If this cultivator is smart, he should find an opportunity to hide in Zhaoyuan. Then he might be able to escape." The golden armor heavenly general was stunned. He shook his head and said, "That's difficult. The difference in their cultivation is too big. If he can escape, how can he go into Cheong Mountain?" Star official Yuchan said, "Then he can only blame his bad luck. This has nothing to do with us." The middle-aged Taoist urged thousands of birds to attack the formation. After a few hours, he realized that the prohibition formation was not weakened at all. The amount of spiritual vigor that was depleted was replenished by the same amount. It was as if it was never depleted. Seeing that this method was useless, he frowned and thought for a moment. He conjured a talisman, and with a flick of his finger, it turned into a golden light and flew away. He had a fellow cultivator hundreds of thousands of miles away. Even if he could not take down the formation alone, he did not believe that two people would not be able to do so. As long as he did not let this person escape before he arrived, it would be fine. Sun Shao had been observing this person's movements through the water mirror. When he saw the golden light fly away, he immediately became alert. He guessed that this person was looking for help. The key was that he had no way to counter it. The other party did not feel threatened and could continue attacking. He could even find more helpers. However, it seemed that this was a dead end. Other than using the talisman to escape, there was no other way. He did not panic. He was still calmly thinking of a solution. After a while, his eyes brightened. He stood up and walked out of the inner room to the side hall. When young Master Shuai saw him, he bowed and said, "Immortal Elder." Sun Shao said, "I'm afraid I have to trouble young Master Shuai to do something." Young Master Shuai's expression turned solemn. He said, "The people of the contract division value their words. Immortal Elders saved my brother. No matter what it is, even if I have to reclaim the sea or move the mountain, I will do it. Even if I lose my life, I will not complain." Sun Shao said, "There is no need for that. I have a question first. Why isn't the human domain outside of Cheong Mountain?" Young Master Shuai was startled. He then sighed and said, "There is a pass on top of Cheong Mountain. Outside is a wasteland. There is no geographical advantage and no natural barriers. It is difficult to fight against demons and other races. That is why I gave it up." Sun Shao nodded. "Then how is it considered a human domain? How can it be considered?" Young Master Shuai said without hesitation, "Stationing soldiers, paying tribute, setting up sacrifices. Two of these three, then erecting a monument to mark the boundary. That is our human domain." Sun Shao nodded and said, "Now I want to incorporate this hill under my feet into the human domain. Can young Master Shuai do it?" Young Master Shuai was startled. "Immortal Elder, why?" Sun Shao said, "I will explain this later. Can young Master do it?" Young Master Shuai said in a low voice, "I am the next clan leader, and I have brought over 100 soldiers with me. We can be considered stationing soldiers. With us here, we can't pay tribute, so we can only set up sacrifices." Sun Shao said, "That is easy." He waved his sleeves, and with a roll of smoke, a spell altar rose from the ground. He asked, "Will this work?" Young Master Shuai saw this and said repeatedly, "Yes, yes. We can offer sacrifices to heaven and earth and the 4 Taoist masters. Only the spell altar is not enough. We still need to sacrifice animals to make an oath. There is no such thing here." Sun Shao smiled, and with a turn of his mana, he set up the water mirror technique and said, "Is this enough?" Young Master Shuai looked down and saw countless spiritual birds falling from the water mirror like rain. He couldn't help but stare dumbfounded. After a while, he came back to his senses and said, "Although these are not animals, they are ferocious birds from outside the realm. It is better. I will open the altar and offer sacrifices now." The two gods outside were still watching the battle. They didn't care about Sun Shao, but this demon's magic power was strong. They had to prevent it from affecting Cheong Mountain when it attacked. But at this moment, the golden armored deity let out a sound of surprise. He then praised and said, "Good technique, you can even use this method?" He turned and said, "Star Official Yu-chan, what do you think we should do now?" Star Official Yu-chan said coldly, "This is already our human domain. With a big demon invading, I naturally can't just stand by and do nothing." After saying this, he shook his hand. Following the sound of chains, a golden light came from the sky and fell down. The middle-aged Taoist was originally attacking the formation, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He looked up into the sky and his expression changed. He couldn't care about this anymore. He immediately turned into a 3-headed golden eagle and escaped into the distance. But he didn't go far. Suddenly, a golden flame sprinkled down from the sky. All the feathers on his body suddenly started burning, and he couldn't help but stop. The two golden lights caught up in the blink of an eye and tied him up. Then, with a drag, he was taken into the sky. Sun Shao took all of this into his eyes. At this moment, he felt his mind relax, and it was as if a layer of heavy wet clothes had been removed from his body. A wave of understanding couldn't help but surge into his heart. He hadn't retreated today and had schemed to capture this demon. He had already successfully avoided this calamity, and he wouldn't have to worry about his life for the time being. Chapter 1760. After Sun Shao resolved the crisis, he informed young Master Shui that he could go down the mountain now. Young Master Shui originally wanted to learn the art of immortality, but after this incident, he was not in the mood to mention it. After thanking Shen Lian again, he left with his attendant and younger brother. Within a few days, the news that the hostage of the Qi tribe was healed by the celestial and regained his consciousness spread. Many nobles and families who were also suffering from the soulless disease came to ask for the celestial's help. Sun Shao did not reject anyone, he helped those who came to his door. He did not come here for cultivation, his main purpose was to find the soulless person. If his reputation spread, it would be beneficial for him to act. As all the people who came to plead for leniency regained their senses, his reputation grew. Even King Zhao sent someone to invite him when he heard the news. However, he rejected the invitation and just sat in the mountain, waiting for the fated person to come to his door. Northwest Land, Mount Yeson. Yunjin sat on the high platform, observing the celestial bodies and calculating the changes in time. Even though this consumed a lot of magical power, it involved the struggle for the origin jade of Zhou, so he didn't dare to be careless. He had to do this every day in order to avoid any carelessness and missing something. An attendant walked up, bowed and handed over a letter, saying, "Master, there is a letter delivered by bird." Yunjin nodded, "Put it down." The attendant bade farewell and retreated. Yunjin picked up the letter, opened it and saw that it was about the recent events that happened to Sun Shao. He did not note Sun Zhao's background, but it was not difficult to guess that he was a cultivator from the four heavens. He thought to himself, this person is staring at those suffering from the soulless disease. Could it be related to Zhou Huanyun Jade? He felt that it was possible. Now that all the forces were looking for the fated person, even if there was a small possibility, they had to catch him. They could not let him go easily. Hence, he wrote a sentence under the letter, asking his spies to keep an eye on this person and report to him if anything happens, but not to act rashly. He felt that the first signs had just appeared, and there was no need to rush into the scene. The jade of Zhou Huanyuan would not appear so casually. Although he could find thousands and thousands of fated people, in the end, there would only be one that could cause the Yuan jade to appear. It would be very difficult to find the right one. Fortunately, he had the most important chess piece in his hand. He looked down from the stage and saw a young child playing with a few other young playmates. This was the son of King Zhao. After Ding Ling gave birth to him, half a year later, he found a chance and used a spell to send him into the sky. Then he used a spirit bird to send him into the Ying tribe. This was also the reason why the gods did not interfere. This was not a demon's matter, it was the Wang family's private matter. This child had a strange appearance. He was not even 3 years old, but he already looked like a 7 or 8-year-old child. According to Yuan Zhen's calculations, in less than 10 years, there would be chaos in the Zhao nation. At that time, he could think of a way to send the troops of the Ying tribe into the court to help. They could kill the disobedient officials and quell the rebellion. Then, he could use this child to take the jade on behalf of the country. He could take over the human Dao tribe in one fell swoop, then he could use the imperial decree to lock the country. In this way, he would not be able to take all the fated people in the world, but at least half of them. If he still could not get the Zhou Huanyun jade, then it could only be the will of the heavens, and not because he was not diligent. In the southwest of the Qiong mountain, O Shen wore heavy hemp clothing and his hair was disheveled. He was herding hundreds of sheep on the desert. He was the brother of Prince Zhao, Zhu Chao, from a different mother. According to age, he should have succeeded the previous monarch. However, his mother's tribe was weak, so he was banished here to herd cattle and horses for the royal family. He could never return to Zhaoyuan. There were originally more than 1,000 people from his mother's tribe who were banished here with him. However, food and water were scarce here, and there were fierce beasts. After a few years, there were only about 300 people left. He only returned to his family's residence in the evening. He entered the tent and stamped his feet, shaking off a layer of dirt. At this time, he noticed that there was another person in the tent. He raised his head and saw that it was a white-faced Taoist. He was startled and then revealed a happy expression. He bowed and said, "Immortal Elder One is here. Last time, under the guidance of Immortal Elder, we indeed dug out a sweet spring and saved the lives of my tribe. I have yet to thank Immortal Elder for this." Taoist One chuckled and said, "This is a small matter. Have you seen the scripture that I gave to young master?" Ocean said, "I have, but there are many things I don't understand. I was just about to ask Immortal Elder." Taoist One said, "What questions does young master have?" Ocean asked worriedly, "This scripture can only be seen and not eaten. Even if I can read it, how can I save my tribe?" Taoist One said, "No wonder young master has such doubts. This scripture is a general description of the classics and not the proper method of yin and yang. If you can obtain the latter, it will not be difficult to save young master's people." Ocean's eyes lit up. He grabbed the arm and asked anxiously, "Where can I find the proper method?" Taoist One said seriously, "To be honest with young master, I was originally a mule. But one day, I listened to a scripture that was passed down and understood many mysteries from it. In order to find the proper method, I walked to the Dayan Plains and listened to the Tianzuan's disciple, Shangzhen Ling Di, teaching me the fundamental great method. I cultivated for 60 years and just now, I can transform into a human form and enter Tao." Ocean suddenly heard that he was not a human. If it was in the past, he would definitely be afraid. But after the sudden change, his mind was tempered and he was able to remain calm. He asked, "The Dayan Plains? Where can I find the proper method?" Taoist One said, "Yes." Ocean said anxiously, "Immortal Elder, please tell me how to get there." Taoist One said, "I can tell young master, but young master has to promise me one thing." Ocean said, "Immortal Elder, please speak." Taoist One drew a circle with his hand and a spirit mirror appeared. He said, "Young master, please take a look." Ocean looked into the mirror and saw many scenes. It was a group of living slaves struggling to survive under the different races. They were treated like livestock. He could not bear to look at the miserable scenes. Taoist One said, "Young master can only see your own suffering and the suffering of your people. You have never seen the suffering of others. These people are the people of Tao scattered among the different races. When young master goes, you should gather them and bring them to the Dayan Plains to listen to the teachings of the superior method and open up the human world." Ocean thought for a long time. Finally, he showed a determined expression and said, "Immortal Elder is right. I am the descendant of Yao Gan. These are my people, how can I abandon them? If I can go to the Dayan Plains, I will bring them along." He then looked over and solemnly promised, "If I can establish a country in the Dayan Plains, I will worship the Tianzuan for generations. If I go against this oath, I will be abandoned by both humans and gods." Taoist One nodded his head and said happily, "Very good, very good." Under the guidance of Taoist One, Ocean led the people of the tribe towards the southwest. Along the way, he saved the people who were trapped in the different races. After 9 years of hard work, he finally brought the people of the tribe to the Dayan Plains. On the day he arrived, flowers fell from the sky and the ground was filled with sweet spring water. His ears were filled with the loud chanting. Ocean knelt down and kowtowed to the majestic pagoda under the sun. The people behind him supported each other and knelt down to worship. Taoist One also knelt down to worship. But at this moment, he felt his vision blurred and he found himself in a big hall. He heard Hong Da's voice coming down from above. "Today there is one Ma who has brought the human path tribes to the north, so that the Yin Yuan cultivators will have people to worship. This is a great merit. This is the Dharma seat of almsgiving, upholding the right sex law. bestowing the difficult clothes. Taoist one only felt his body tremble. A scepter appeared in his hand and a jade-colored Taoist robe draped over his body. He was emotional and bowed again, saying, "One Emo thanks heavenly truth," because the demon Yuan Zun had previously made a promise. Not only himself, but even the Dharma preachers were not allowed to enter the territory of the people of Tao. Therefore, he did not have any status before this. Even if he was killed, no one would stand up for him. Instead, they would try to clear their names. Now that he had returned, he could finally enter the court and fulfill his wish. The loud voice said again, "Although the people of Ocean have arrived at the Dayan Plains, they still need to be enlightened. I will leave this matter to you." Taoist one respectfully said, "One Ma obeys." At the same time, thousands of miles away in the Dayan Plains, there was an unforeseen event. Prince Zhao Zhuchao was a lazy person and did not care about the affairs of the country. His mother's family, the Yu family, took this opportunity to steal power. After more than 10 years, they were taken over. Not only that, the Yu family also used Prince Zhao's name to oppress the people. They built palaces and secretly spread nursery rhymes to tarnish Prince Zhao's name. They also created all kinds of strange phenomena in various places to prove that he was a despicable ruler. Because Zhu Chao's eyes and ears had long been blocked, other than feasting and hunting, all he did was watch dances and music. The attendants around him were all arranged by the Yu family. Some of the clan elders who dared to speak up warned them. After that, they were either reprimanded or sentenced to death. With such coercion as time passed, no one dared to speak up. After 15 years of planning, the Yu family felt that the time was ripe. One night, while Zhu Chao was out hunting, they set fire to the palace. When they found his charred corpse in the ruins and confirmed that he was dead, they immediately sent troops to kill more than 100 members of the Zhao family. However, a day later, the leader of the Yu family, Yu Chao, ascended the throne with troops and announced to the 4 states that the prisoners would be pardoned. A few days later, at the foot of the hill outside of Cheong Mountain, a young man appeared. Behind him, there seemed to be pursuers. He was in a hurry to go up the mountain, but he couldn't reveal his identity, so he was stopped by the guards. In a hurry, he shouted, "I am a soulless person, I don't remember anything from before. I've come to beg Celestial Master to cure me." Sen Shao was originally sitting, but when he heard this voice, his heart moved and he ordered, "Bring this person up the mountain." The young man came to the hall and bowed, "Greetings, Celestial Master." Sen Shao looked at him and said, "What is your name?" The young man said without hesitation, "My name is Chen Mang." Sen Shao smiled, "Since you are a soulless person, how would you remember your own name?" Chen Mang realized that he had said something wrong and his face turned pale. Sen Shao said meaningfully, "You need to know that even if I cure you, you will still have to leave the mountain. You can hide for a while, but you can't hide for a lifetime." Chen Mang was startled, then he immediately understood and bowed, "Please accept me as your disciple, Celestial Master." Sen Shao smiled and said, "If that's the case, then kneel down and kowtow." Chen Mang was just testing it out. He didn't think that he could really become an Celestial Master's disciple. At first, he didn't believe it, then he was overjoyed. He knelt down and kowtowed, saying, "Disciple greets Master." Sen Shao nodded. He could now confirm that Chen Mang was one of those fated people. In the future, the Zhou Huanyuan jade would most likely appear on him. However, this would definitely attract the covetous eyes of those with ulterior motives. He changed his mind, "Looks like I can't stay here for long." Chapter 1761. The Yu clan stealing the country was like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples, causing the world to be in an uproar. Back then, the Jade tribe defeated the other tribes and led the people to take back Cheongshan and Zhaoyuan. Just now, with this achievement, the Jade tribe became the ruler. The Yu clan had no merit, no reputation, and seized power. Naturally, it was difficult for the people to calm down. Hence, many human tribes rose up to rebel against the Yu clan. The Yu clan was naturally unwilling to hand over the divine weapon that they had stolen. Because they had been planning this for a long time, they reacted quickly. Taking advantage of the fact that the tribes had yet to unite, they quickly sent troops to quell the rebellion. Relying on the great number of Magisprius in the clan, the few clans that had spoken out earlier were soon wiped out one after another. The few clans that had been ready to make a move had also quieted down. The situation seemed to be quite good, and if the situation continued like this, the Magispriists might actually succeed. But at this moment, a turning point appeared. After the Yu clan army destroyed a large tribe, because they felt that the spoils were not enough, they turned their troops to attack a small tribe called Wen. Originally, they thought that once the army arrived, they would definitely be able to raze it to the ground. However, during the intense battle, a few cultivators had appeared in the sky and executed various divine abilities and techniques. The shaman priests that followed the army could be said to be unable to fight back at all, and this army had suffered a crushing defeat because of this. Ever since the cultivators descended to the lower realm, the tribes also worshipped many of them. Mainly, it was convenient for them to ask for the art of immortality. As for using it in battle, because of the gods above their heads, no one dared to think of using it. But after this battle, the tribes then realized that when these cultivators attacked, not a single god came out to stop them. This was natural. This matter was, in essence, an internal conflict between the human tribes. The rise and fall of dynasties was very common. As long as it did not involve demons or other species harming mortals, the gods naturally did not care. And after hearing this, the tribes that were originally afraid of the Yu clan and retreated in fear all raised their weapons again. At the same time, they followed the example of Wen tribe and invited cultivators to the army. The Yu clan was also not willing to sit still and wait for death. Using the external objects of cultivation, they also recruited many cultivators. But in this way, the conflict between the various tribes had evolved into an internal conflict between cultivators. However, most of the Taoist cultivators were here for external medicine and were not mortal enemies. Of course, they would not fight to the death for mortals. When they met on the battlefield, they would only greet each other politely. Those with lower cultivation bases would take the initiative to give way. If their skills were similar, they would talk about their seniority and seniors. At most, they would spar a little. Rarely would they really fight to the death. Moreover, they were happy to let the battle drag on. This way, they could gain more from the other tribes. The various tribes quickly noticed that this sort of battle completely gave the right to decide the outcome of the battle to the cultivators. This didn't conform to their original expectations, but in reality, they couldn't do anything about it, so they were extremely worried. Just as the battle was at a stalemate, the Yu clan broke the stalemate first. The Moon King received advice from the mutants and recruited ferocious monsters and demons for his own use. Most of these mutants and ferocious monsters were natives of Kunshe. Some of them had only been able to take human form after listening to some basic scriptures. They were no longer beasts and naturally wouldn't follow any rules. Every time there was a battle, they would kill the cultivators. For a time, the Yu clan won again and again in battle. However, they didn't realize that doing so was actually risking the world's condemnation. They were cutting themselves off from humanity. Even some of the tribes that had been watching from the sidelines saw that the Yu clan had actually allied with demons and mutants. They were enraged and mobilized their troops, causing the situation to become more and more intense. A storm was brewing in the Kunshe continent, but Zhang Yan and the others sat in the four heavens and did not move. Under the calculations of the four of them, they knew that most of the fated people had already appeared. The easiest thing to do now was to wait. After waiting for a few dozen years, if there were no major changes, most of these people would naturally die of old age. Then, it would be much easier to find the origin jade from the remaining people. However, it wasn't that there were no variables here. A few of the fated people were taken in by the mutants. From this point of view, the origin jade might also fall into their hands. This was something unavoidable because the demons were also a force that stirred up karma. They naturally had the opportunity to obtain this item. Dan Yi and the others knew that because the true body of the Khanate demons couldn't enter the Kunshe continent, if they sent people to snatch it by force, this generation would definitely not be a match for them. However, They had to worry that if there were too many external disturbances, the origin jade might not appear so smoothly. It was even possible that it wouldn't appear after this tribulation. For example, when Sun Shao took in disciples, he waited for the disciples to come up the mountain and worship themselves. He didn't take the initiative to ask. This was because he was worried that if he interfered too much, it would cause the origin jade to not appear. Therefore, before the results appeared, he could only sit and watch. Dan Yi calculated again and sighed. The tribes of the human Tao only have a few tens of millions of people, and the territory they occupy isn't big. In the next 50 years, the results will be clear. In just a few decades, it can be said to pass in the blink of an eye. However, we have to consider what we should do if the origin jade is taken by the demons. Fu Qingming said, if it only falls into the hands of the demons, there is still room for negotiation. This generation is restricted by the agreement. If they want to bring back those who died in battle, they have to come out and exterminate the extraterrestrial demons. However, they have the Tai Golden Pearl behind them. It will definitely be taken by them. Michihito Ichido said coldly, then I'd rather snatch it. Even if it causes the origin jade to be unable to enter the world, we can't let this bastard succeed. However, Danny said, no. The origin jade entering the world involves many mysteries that even we don't know about. Even the sages of the past were cautious and didn't dare to act rashly. We should also be cautious. Moreover, this is equivalent to shedding all pretense of cordiality with Taoist Taoyi. If it causes the demons and the heartless path to besiege us, then we won't be able to resist. Fu Qingming and Michihito Ichido were also silent. As long as there was no way to restrain this person, there was no way to talk about any plan. Because whichever side this person stood on, that side would definitely win. From this point of view, if the origin jade did not fall on their side, then it would most likely be snatched by this person. Michihito Ichido frowned and said, now, the only thing that can restrain this bastard is another primordial cardinal treasure. However, after this treasure entered the world, we don't know where it has hidden and we still can't find it. What can we do? At this time, Zhang Yan said, regarding this treasure, I have some clues. Dan Yi's spirit rose and he said, oh, fellow Taoist, could it be that you have found this treasure? Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, I can't be completely sure at the moment. I will try my best, but even if I find this treasure, it may not listen to my orders. So I need to be prepared. At this point, he reminded, if it really comes to that, we actually don't have to defeat Taoist. As long as we can delay him for a moment, how can the heavenly demon and heartless path Taoists sit still? When Dan Yi and the others heard this, they all seemed to be deep in thought. Although it would be extremely difficult to carry out this plan, it was still a method. Great Ling Mountain, by division. Master Ji ended his daily preaching. After bidding farewell to his students, he walked down the branch path and returned to his residence. Along the way, from time to time, elders bowed to him. He was now more than 100 years old, but his appearance was still the same. He said that he ate a dan fruit in his early years, which was why he looked like this. Even though this was a little strange, the people in the tribe could accept it. Master Ji could receive teachings from an immortal in his dream, so it was possible for him to gain some benefits. Plus, Master Ji's long lifespan was also beneficial to them. Master Ji turned a corner and saw the plains below. The cultivated fertile land was shrouded in the sunset, looking very beautiful. The people in the tribe supported the old and the young, and their faces were filled with happiness. His eyes revealed a complicated expression as he thought, I didn't want to stay here for 100 years. Recently, I've been feeling uneasy. Even though I don't want to leave, it's time to leave. After returning to his residence, he was about to push the door open when someone came near and handed him a letter. My lord invites Master Ji to a banquet. Master Ji took it and smiled. So it's the immortal monarch's invitation. Please reply that I will come on time. Ing Shi was a god, and among mortals, only he and Jun Wuqi could see her. Therefore, he often came to invite the two of them. He thought that since they knew each other, he should greet them before he left. The person respectfully retreated. Ji Shi went back to burn some incense and bathe. When it was evening, he whistled and went to the top of a tree. A divine steed big bird flew over and he sat on it. Not long after, they arrived in front of the guardian deity temple. He landed and walked up the stairs. Because they were very familiar with each other, the guard not only didn't ask, but also opened the door for him. When Master Ji reached the inner room, he did not see Ying Shi. Instead, he saw a pale-faced young man sitting on the guest seat. He was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "So, Immortal Lord Ying has invited an immortal master as a guest." Zhang Chan smiled and said, "I'm not here as a guest. I'm here to deliver a letter to you." As he said this, he took out a talisman and handed it over with both hands. "This is my lord's handwritten letter." Master Ji's expression changed slightly. He hesitated for a moment but still took it. Once the letter was in his hand, he suddenly felt that everything around him stopped, as if everything was frozen. When he looked up again, he saw a black-robed Taoist standing there. Master Ji's expression finally changed. He cried out, "Xinyuan Taoist Lord?" He immediately realized that he had said something wrong. After a moment of silence, he let out a long sigh and cupped his hands. "When did Taoist Lord see through me?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are bound to be involved in karma when you are in the mortal world. You planted the seed in the early years, and the fruit will eventually appear. I was just one step ahead of others." Master Ji let out a long sigh. After he entered the mortal world, he relied on his innate supernatural power to exist in this body. That was why no one noticed anything wrong. Even Jun Wuqi only suspected it and couldn't confirm it. He didn't expect that his tracks would be exposed in the end. He said dejectedly, "Since Taoist Lord is here to find me, I guess I can't escape." Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled. "Fellow Taoist, you worry too much. Your qi activity has yet to solidify, and you are far from being a match for the Tai Golden Pearl. Moreover, if you are unwilling, I can't force you." Master Ji was stunned. He said, "If that's not the reason, then why did Taoist Lord come?" Zhang Yan said meaningfully, "Just as I said just now, fellow Taoist, there will always be traces when you are in the mortal world. If I can find you, then others can too. It's fine if I find fellow Taoist, but if it's someone else or the Tai Golden Pearl, they may not treat fellow Taoist well." Chapter 1762. What Zhang Yanji said was exactly what the Ji clan was worried about. He knew that with his identity, he would be feared by all the mighty figures, especially the Tai Golden Bead. Although they were both primordial cardinal treasures, they would not see him as one of their kind. Instead, they would see him as an obstacle. It was also for this reason that he had hidden in the Gu tribe for more than 100 years. He had thought that he would stay hidden until his qi activity was condensed. Then he would be unafraid of anyone like the Tai Golden Bead. But now, it seemed that it was wishful thinking. It was likely that he could no longer hide. He sighed and said, "Does the Taoist come to protect me?" The so-called protection was just a nice way of saying it. In his opinion, even if the Taoist did not use him, he would not allow him to fall into the hands of the enemy. He would most likely imprison him. He could not resist this. After all, he had not become a true cardinal treasure. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Fellow Taoist, you misunderstand. I did not mean that." Although taking the primordial cardinal treasure into his own pocket in advance could ensure that others would not be able to touch it, he knew that this was not a good choice. Instead, it could bring endless troubles to his side. If the primordial cardinal treasure surrendered, it would be enough to stir up the situation in the world. It would certainly cause changes in the heavens. The Tai Golden Bead had always been very sensitive to this. He was sure that even if there was only a little doubt, he would come to stop it at all costs. This was because he knew very well that once Yuan Zun of the human Tao obtained the primordial cardinal treasure, there would be no need to fear him in the future. In that case, he would not be able to take the Zhou Huanyuan jade and use it to achieve Tao. Therefore, if they really took Ji in, it would only cause the human Tao to go against them in advance. There would be no room for negotiation. Taoist might even spread the news and encourage the extraterrestrial demons, primordial demons, and even the heartless path to attack together. Because Xi had not truly achieved anything yet, he could not be a helper. Therefore, if such a situation really happened, the human Tao that had just now been restored might collapse again. Seeing him deny it, Lady Xi could not help feeling puzzled and asked, "Then, could it be that you came here today just to say these words to me?" Before Zhang Yan came to see him, he already had a lot of plans in mind, but he hadn't really made up his mind. He was going to see the temperament of this supreme treasure first before making any concrete plans. Looking at him now, this could be said to be a person with a comfortable heart, completely different from Tai Jinju's seemingly modest but actually arrogant temperament. In his heart, he ruled out those violent methods. He said, "Fellow Taoists should also know that in this battle, the stronger side wins. Therefore, the four of us have our own selfish motives. Although we don't want to forcefully confine fellow Taoists, we also don't wish for fellow Taoists to be invited by others and turn around to deal with us." Lady Xi took a deep breath and asked carefully, "Then what does Taoist Venerable want?" Zhang Yan said, "Just as I said, fellow Taoists' method of hiding will be discovered sooner or later. Because of this, I am willing to give you a spell. Not to say that you can completely avoid karma, but it won't be difficult for you to hide from the Almighties for a period of time." Lady Xi never thought that he would do this. He was in slight disbelief and asked, "Really?" Zhang Yan pointed with his finger, and a spiritual light suddenly appeared, turning into a talisman. He said, "Fellow Taoist, please receive it." Lady Xi's mind changed, and he also understood Zhang Yan's intention for doing this. However, he did not dislike it, and instead, he owed the latter a favor because he really needed to conceal his identity now. After calming himself down, he raised his hands to receive it. Just now, when he touched it, a spiritual light shone on his body, and he couldn't help but be shocked, but he quickly calmed down. With Zhang Yan's supernatural power, if he wanted to do anything, he could do it openly. There was no need for him to beat around the bush. After a few breaths, he felt his mood lighten up, as if the haze had disappeared, and he felt refreshed. He immediately knew that this method was superior, and it seemed that he would not have to worry about being discovered in the short term. Although he knew that Yuan Zun had his own purpose, he still felt grateful. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Lord Shen Yuan, for giving me the method." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Although fellow Taoist has obtained this method, you don't have to move to another place, or else it will only increase the number of variables." Lady Xi sighed and said, "I also know that if I go out, it will be very easy to expose my tracks. However, most of the people in the Gu tribe were personally taught by me, and I have always seen them as my juniors. I am afraid that if my identity is exposed, it will bring trouble to them." Ever since he entered the human realm, he had been living in a mortal body, and his nature was not much different from the original Lady Xi. It could be said that the two of them could be considered the same person. He was also very reluctant to leave the Gu tribe, but he was also afraid that he would drag the whole tribe down. Zhang Yan looked at him and nodded, "Fellow Taoist, you have a kind heart, but you don't have to worry about this. The Gu tribe will be protected by my people. As long as I and the four Taoist friends are still here, there will be no danger. If fellow Taoist leaves, as long as you leave a trace, others will still find the Gu tribe. Therefore, if fellow Taoist stays here, you will be able to protect the people here." Lady Xi was stunned and frowned, but she had to admit that what Zhang Yan said made sense. He had been in the Gu tribe for 100 years, and they were deeply involved. The traces left behind were indeed not that easy to erase. In fact, it did not matter whether he left or not. If that was the case, he did not need to leave anymore. After thinking it through, he cupped his hands and said sincerely, "I have learned something." Zhang Yan said, "It is difficult for us to predict the changes of the heavenly mystery. What I said is just advice. It is up to fellow Taoists to decide how to proceed." Just as Lady Xi was about to say something, she suddenly felt the scenery outside, which had been stagnant, become lively again. She knew that the other party had left. Not only that, Zhang Chan, who had handed over the book, had disappeared without a trace. He sighed, then took a deep breath and pulled himself together. At this moment, a servant came up and said, "His Excellency has planted many strange flowers and fruits in the garden. Mr. Ji, please go and have a look." Lady Ji cupped her hands and said, "Senior servant, please lead the way." After Zhang Yan's spirit returned, he saw that Lady Ji did not leave and knew that she had accepted his words, so he nodded. This time, he mainly wanted to form a karmic relationship with this person. Once the karmic relationship was established, it would not be difficult to predict where this person went in the future. However, he had already seen that in the next few decades, this person would not be able to achieve anything. Even if he was willing to stand on the side of humanity, he would not be able to fight against the Tai Golden Pearl. To deal with this person, he still had to think of another way. Previously, he had said to Dan Yi and the others that if Tai made a move, then he would first think of a way to stall him and then wait for a turning point to appear. This was not empty talk, and he did have some confidence. When he fought against the Khanate demons, he relied on his boundless magic power and the Patriarch's secret method, and he had not established his own Dao at that time. But now, it was different. After visualizing the Taishen true scripture, his Dao had something to rely on. If he fought with others, his magic power would flow according to it, and his combat ability would increase by a lot. Moreover, he still had the body of the demon master of Power Path outside, so he did not have to enter the battlefield to fight, but he could also incite the extraterrestrial demons to attack. In short, he would not be completely powerless to fight back. In the mystic Kong realm, Taoist Daoi sat on the Dharma Tower, his eyes constantly scanning the land of Kuan-Shur continent. These days, he did not fall into a deep sleep, because he also knew that Zhou Huanyuan Jade had entered the world, and in a few decades he would see the results. This was related to his great plan to achieve Dao, and he could not afford any mistakes, so he kept watching at all times. Even if it consumed his own essence, he refused to relax at all. But just now, he suddenly felt a trace of change in the heavenly secrets. When he wanted to take a closer look, it quickly disappeared, but he felt a little annoyed in his heart for no reason. He faintly felt that something was wrong, and he deduced that something bad must have happened here, but it was covered by the heavenly secrets. Now in the world, there were very few people who could affect him and cause a certain degree of threat, but this must include the primordial treasures of this era. He said coldly, "Jun Wuqi is useless, and I still can't find any clues." He knew that he could not rely on this disciple. If he waited any longer, he was afraid that things would reach an irreversible point, so he had to take more initiative. With this thought in mind, he came to the great mound in a flash. Golden palaces and white pagodas stood in great numbers, fragrant flowers paved the way, jewels and jewels covered the place, and devout believers were chanting ceaselessly. He glanced around, and in the end, he saw a white city built on the peak of a mountain. With an idea, he disappeared on the spot. Lu Li and Bai Wei had gone to Bu Su Tian to assume command in order to get Zhou Huanyuan Jade. However, the Great Mound was their base, and over the years, they had been fighting fiercely with the extraterrestrial demons. Therefore, in case of accidents, the two of them had their clones stay here. Inside the Bao Rudezheng house, Bai Wei and Lu Li were sitting on a lotus altar. They were giving a sermon and imparting scriptures. Their witty words triggered the mysteries of heaven, causing golden flowers to fall down, cranes to hover, animals to bow down, and bells to ring. The 8,000 followers were listening to them with reverence. All of them looked solemn. Suddenly, Bai Wei sensed something. He stopped preaching and said, "That is all for today. You can all leave now." The believers stood up, bowed, and slowly left the great mound in an orderly manner. After everyone left, Bai Wei and Lu Li stood up, cupped their fists, and said, "Fellow Taoist Daoi, what brings you here?" Taoist Daoi showed himself. With his hands clasped behind his back, he said, "Crossing two heavens has caused a great commotion, and it is quite troublesome. That is why I am here to see you." Bai Wei made a gesture of invitation and said, "Fellow Taoist, please sit down and talk." Taoist Daoi sat on the platform and said, Now that the primordial jade has entered the world, how confident are the two of you in obtaining it? Bai Wei said, the location of the primordial jade can be said to be determined by the heavens. We can only do our best. Lu Li said, our believers are searching everywhere for the fated ones. It will take at least several decades before the results of this item can be seen. Fellow Taoist Dowie, it is a bit too early to ask now. Taoist Dowie snorted and said, if I don't come, I am afraid the two of you will inevitably be manipulated by Yuan Zun. Bai Wei said, fellow Taoist, why do you say so? Taoist Dowie said coldly, I have been observing the heavenly secrets. The people of Yuan Zun has most likely found out the whereabouts of the primordial treasures of this era. If this person takes the primordial jade away, the two of you should know what the consequences will be without me saying anything. Chapter 1763. Taoist priest Dowie originally didn't want to talk about the primordial treasure with Bai Wei and Bai Wei. He was afraid that they would have other ideas after learning about it. However, after thinking about it, the threat of this treasure was too great, and he didn't have the ability to find it by himself. Currently, the interests of the three of them were still tied together, so he could lend it to them. Moreover, the treasure had not been fully formed yet, so it was useless even if it was in his hands. If he could find it in advance, he would have enough time to destroy it. Bai Wei said slowly, fellow Taoist, you should understand that our disciples can't go to the territory of the human Tao, and the rest of us are looking for Zhou Huanyuan jade. This has already mobilized most of our strength, and even if this primordial treasure has not been fully formed, it is not something that ordinary disciples can deal with. Even if we force ourselves to find it, we may not be able to find it. Seeing that he was evading, Taoist priest Dowie was displeased and said, don't talk to me like this. Even if it is difficult to enter the Kunshi continent, there are many strange creatures in the primordial sea of the void. As long as you are willing to use your vitality to improve their cultivation, you can have as many monsters as you want. Why are you talking about lacking manpower? You just don't want to put in the effort. Lu Li said in a deep voice, fellow Taoist priest Dowie, you have wronged us. There is a reason for this. Taoist priest Dowie sneered and said, then I want to hear your explanation. Lu Li said, under normal circumstances, we can indeed do as you say, but as you can see, we are currently being attacked by the extraterrestrial demon, and there are disciples dying at every moment. In order to find Zhou Huanyuan jade, we have to face the human Tao Yuan Zun and even the heartless Taoists. We can't be distracted, so we have given up most of the realms and retreated here. Now, we can only barely maintain our defensive position. We really don't have any extra strength. Bai Wei said, the Miaokong realm is the fundamental place, and we have been managing it for a long time. If this place is destroyed, I'm afraid we won't be able to compete with the human Tao Yuan Zun. If that happens, I'm afraid you won't be able to achieve your goal. Taoist priest Dowie said coldly, are you two threatening me? Lu Li bowed slightly, cupped his fists, and said, not at all. I am just telling the truth. I hope you don't misunderstand. Even if I can create many disciples now, as long as that sky fiend doesn't take back his inner demons, he can't be sure how long he can live. Taoist priest Dowie stared at Lu Li and Bai Wei for a long time. Lu Li and Bai Wei seemed to be calm. After a while, Taoist priest Dowie snorted and said, I will deal with the extraterrestrial demons myself. He stood up. The next time I come, I don't want to hear any excuses from the two of you. Bai Wei stood up as well, cupped his fist, and said, fellow Taoist, we've made an oath, and it can be said that we're bound together for good or ill. So long as the devils retreat, we'll naturally do our best to allocate manpower to search for the whereabouts of that natural treasure. When Taoist priest Dowie heard this, his expression softened a little. After bidding farewell, he flicked his sleeve and disappeared in a flash of golden light. Bai Wei looked in the direction he left in and said indifferently, he's already anxious. Lu Li frowned and said, but won't we anger him by doing this? Bai Wei said calmly, the Zhou Huanyuan jade is about to appear in the world, and it will be revealed in a few decades. It'll be too late for him to find someone else, so he can only rely on us. If we don't raise our conditions now, when will we? He paused for a moment and said, as for whether he's angry or not, we don't have to worry about it. He already has the intention to use us. This time, if we can find the Zhou Huanyuan jade, he won't care about this. Lu Li asked, what if he can't find it? Bai Wei said calmly, if I can't find it, then no matter how respectful I am to him, it's useless. But you and I are not his slaves, so why should we listen to his orders? Although we've made an oath to help him obtain the Zhou Huanyuan jade, if he does something to us first, then that means he broke the oath first. In that case, there's no need for us to pay any more attention to him. In the past, Taoist priest Daoyi had been treating them like subordinates, which made the two of them unhappy. However, they had to ask for his protection because of the situation, so they had to put up with it. On the other hand, the reason they spoke earlier seemed to be even more unyielding than before was because the two of them had gathered a great deal of precious materials in these past few years, and they'd refined a magic treasure that was specialized in teleportation. This artifact was not as powerful as the heavenly ship Zhang Yan had, but it could help them avoid Taoist priest Daoyi's pursuit. When the two sides fell out, they could at least have a way out. Lu Li thought, if I can get my hands on that primordial treasure, I might be able to fight against him. I wonder if I can get my hands on it. Bai Wei waved his hand and said, there's no need to think about it. This treasure is extremely troublesome. No matter who gets their hands on it, they will be besieged by all the mighty figures in the universe. I believe that Taoist priest Daoyi is only looking for its whereabouts so that he can destroy it before it truly achieves its goal. Lu Li sighed and said, what a pity. This treasure was also born at the wrong time. When the Tai golden bead was born, the primordial treasure of the first era had disappeared without a trace. The cultivators who survived after the Great Calamity did not choose to attack it when it was weak in order to subdue it in the future. Later on, when they found that this treasure was very difficult to refine, it was too late for them to regret it. They could only seal it up. After the discussion, the two of them went back to teach the Tao. However, several days later, they found that the demons that had been constantly invading had gradually retreated. They knew that Taoist priest Daoyi had restrained the demons. They did not break their promise. They immediately grabbed 3 powerful demons from the void and used their fundamental scriptures to enlighten them. At the same time, they used their Yuan Qi to raise their cultivation. When they were done, they sent them to the Kunshe continent. It was not that they did not want to send more demons, but they had never opened the sky in Busha heaven. It was not easy to send living beings to the Kunshe continent. In the past, they could only send 1 or 2 demons at a time. At the same time, they would try to cover it up so that Yuan Zun would not find out. Now, they had sent 3 demons at once. Even if Taoist priest Daoyi saw it, he could not say anything. As soon as the 3 demons arrived on the continent, they split up and went to search for the places where the primordial treasure might be. Qinghuan Palace in Xianyuan Heaven. After Zhang Yan regained his consciousness, he used his transcendence energy to conceal the operation of the heavenly secrets. This couldn't completely hide Zhishi's traces, but in addition to the incantation he gave him, he could delay for a period of time. At the moment, this treasure was at its weakest and was very likely to be destroyed by someone. But once it was condensed, no one could control it. Even the Tai golden bead could not do anything to it. While he was visualizing the Taishan true scripture, he noticed that there was a slight change in the mystery of heaven because his Taoist magic had made great progress recently. So, he divined and vaguely felt something. He did not let it go and chased after it. After a long time, his eyes fell on the 3 demons. After another divination, he knew that they were looking for the whereabouts of Zhishi. Although Taoist priest Daoyi and the innate demons were unable to calculate the exact whereabouts of the Zhi clan, with their abilities, it was not difficult for them to deduce the general location of the Zhi clan. Among the 3 great demons that entered the End Realm, one of them was heading towards the Zhi clan. If they were left alone, they might discover something. Thinking of this, he raised his finger and immediately condensed 3 talismans. Then, with a flick of his finger, they turned into spiritual light and flew away. By Luo Tian. Tongwa sect master Taoist Tong Guang was discussing Taoist magic with junior brother Tong Hai. Suddenly, he saw a talisman floating along the water and was surprised. He took it and looked at it. Then he said to Taoist Tong Hai with a serious expression, "Exalted Lord Zhang invited me to Kunshe continent to kill the great demons. I think Exalted Lord Zhang must have divined something. Seeing that we are of the same bloodline, he gave me some benefits. Looks like I have to go." Taoist Tong Hai said, "Sect Master Senior Brother, do you need my help?" Taoist Tong Guang said, "No need. After I leave, I will entrust everything in the sect to you, Junior Brother." Taoist Tong Hai patted his chest and said, "I will be in the sect. Junior Brother, don't worry." Taoist Tong Guang smiled and said, "With Junior Brother here, I will be at ease." After that, he boarded the carriage and went to Kunshe continent. On the other side, Mize sect Master Guijuang also received a talisman. He could also understand the mysteries of this place and understood that if he went alone, he might be able to obtain some benefits. However, ever since he was trapped in the ruined lands for 1,000 years, he had become exceptionally careful in his actions and was unwilling to take risks recklessly. In order to ensure the success of this trip, he did not hesitate to use his karma points and asked 2 of his fellow Taoists to help him in battle. As for the final talisman, it headed straight for Mount White Radiance. Within the underwater residence, Lu Yenyi was cultivating. Not long ago, she had expended a great deal of effort and just now, she had killed the second person who was entangled in karma. Only the final opponent remained, who would appear 40 years later. This opponent's cultivation was even higher. Even though he could not compare to the first old dragon, he was still extraordinarily powerful. She needed to be even more cautious. If she could not defeat the opponent, even if she could escape, all her previous efforts would be in vain. This tribulation would be the same as not being able to overcome it. As the tribulation power accumulated, the difficulties she would have to face in the future would be even greater. If she succeeded, she would be able to cleanse this karma and return to the sect to cultivate without worry. Naturally, as long as she did not attain true yang, external tribulations would never end. She just had to kill off a portion of the tribulation prematurely. This way, it would be much easier for her to deal with it in the future, and she would not have to face the unstoppable tribulation power right off the bat. It had not been long since she had attained mortal shedding her skin. After these 2 battles, her understanding of the circulation of her divine arts and even the method to calculate the root and fruit of her cultivation had become slightly clearer. However, she still felt that she lacked a killing move that could end the battle in one go. Otherwise, she would not have had to fight so long with her opponent in the previous battle. Therefore, she had been studying her divine arts and Taoist arts in the abode for this period of time. At this moment, she summoned her flying sword and waved her hand lightly. The sword light was like a bright moon, following the edge of her palm. Rings of light appeared and reflected in the pool below. Suddenly, the shadow of the sword light in the pool floated and merged into the real sword light. Strangely, the reflection in the water disappeared at the same time. However, after just 100 breaths, there was a sudden ripple. The illusory swords shattered like bubbles, and the reflection appeared once again. She thought to herself, "It's still a little lacking. What's the problem?" Just as she was thinking, she saw a spiritual light talisman book floating towards her. Her eyes moved. "Teacher?" She raised her hand and caught it. When she opened it, it was already the whole story. She thought to herself, "I can use this demon to sharpen my sword edge." She flicked her clothes and walked out. With a few clangs, rings of sword light flew behind her and finally turned into one. Then, a clear mark streaked across the sky and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1764. Several days later, when Bai Wei was cultivating the fundamental method, he sensed something strange. He checked and found that all the monsters sent to the Kunshe continent were killed. None of them were left. He said in a deep voice, "The death of those monsters means that their whereabouts have been exposed." Lu Li frowned. I don't think I can explain to Tai. Bai Wei thought about it and waved his hand. It's okay. We can try to continue and explain to him at the same time. Compared to this, he was more concerned about something else. He had clearly concealed these beasts, yet not a single one of them had been able to escape. This meant that someone among the Dao Yuan venerates had a higher cultivation level than them. Cultivation was not equal to cultivation. However, in order to reach higher realms or to figure out the enemy's secret skills, those who were good at cultivation would be better. But it was reasonable. In this era, the world was still ruled by the human path. Now that Yuan Zun had returned, he could peek into the great Tao and benefit a lot from it. The fundamental superior sutra they created could not replace the human path in the end, so it was not as good. Actually, there was another reason. Zhang Yan hadn't been cultivating for a long time. In terms of Tao techniques alone, he might not be able to defeat these Khanate demons. However, he had been cultivating the secret techniques passed down by the founding master for many years. So, he was far better than the Khanate demons. Moreover, this advantage would only grow bigger as time passed. Lu Li said, I will tell him now. After a while, he said, there is a rumor that Tai wants me to try again. This time, he will escort me. Bai Wei said, you can tell him that if he fails this time, Yuan Zun will be on high alert. He will have to wait for some time before he makes another move. Lu Li said, understood. Bai Wei, on the other hand, continued to capture ferocious beasts and monsters and infuse them with primordial qi, raising the level of the beasts. When he was done, he waved his sleeve and sent them to Taoist priest Daoi, letting him deal with them as he pleased. On the Kuan-Shi continent, the various tribes fought and made peace. Soon, another 10 years passed. Now that the war was at a stalemate, the Yu clan was powerless to wipe out the other races, and the other tribes could not do anything to the Yu clan, who had the aid of many vicious beasts. The human Dao domain seemed to have returned to its previous state of unity. Because they understood that it was not appropriate for them to fight on their own, a few years ago, the various divisions formed an alliance and elected Qing Liang, the leader of the Qing division, as the leader. The Qing tribe was one of the 5 great tribes in the past. Even though they had been defeated by the Yu tribe back then, they still maintained a certain amount of strength. Over the years, the Yu clan had gathered their strength and launched several expeditions, but they were unable to completely defeat the Qing tribe. However, after exhausting themselves time and time again, the Qing tribe gradually found it difficult to hold on. Inside the tent, the chief of the tribe, Qing Liang, said with a solemn expression, Dear tribe members, just now, I've checked the warehouse and found that there aren't many treasures left. The clan elders were all shocked. Now, the tribes only retained a small number of soldiers. Most of the adult men were engaged in herding and farming in the tribes. Otherwise, they would not have lasted for more than 10 years. On the battlefield, it was entirely up to the cultivators to fight against the demons and beasts. However, the cultivators would not work for free. They needed external herbs and treasures to cultivate or refine magic treasures and pills. An elder asked anxiously, Why didn't you send people to harvest them, clan leader? On the left sat an old man in a white robe and a golden circlet on his head. He said, How can it be so easy? After 10 years, all the external herbs around the tribe have been harvested clean. We need to search further away. How can we fill this hole in time? Cheng Liang said in a low voice, The Yu clan has been preparing for more than 10 years. Needless to say, there are still countless treasures accumulated in the past in the treasury. Given the current situation, as long as they use up all the treasures in our hands, they will not have the help of the immortals, and they will be able to win this war. The elder from before, Daoren, said, Then what if we borrow from other tribes? Cheng Liang shook his head and said, Nowadays, most of the tribes are in the same situation. There is only one exception. Before he finished speaking, a servant came in from outside and presented a letter to the table. He said, My lord, just now, the messenger from the Ying tribe has arrived. He said that in at most 10 days, he will be here. Cheng Liang's expression changed. He picked up the letter and looked at it. He said, There is the obstruction of the Qiong mountain outside. How can they come here? The servant said, The messenger said that they have their own ways. In tribe? The elder's expression changed. Is it the exception that the clan leader mentioned? Cheng Liang said, exactly. The Ying tribe's treasury is full of treasures and medicines. This time, not only will they send people to deliver them to us, they will also send soldiers to help us in battle. The elder was stunned. He said, I heard that this tribe only has a population of 200,000 to 300,000. How many strong soldiers can there be in the tribe? What's the use even if they come? The elder with the golden circlet said, of course not. The Ying tribe and the Bai tribe are located outside of the Cheong mountain, but they are able to multiply on the barren land. This is enough to prove that they are capable. I heard that the Ying tribe obtained a treasure in the early years that can be used to frighten the beasts. If we bring this treasure here, I believe that our generation has a chance of winning. Hearing this, he was more confident. Yuan Zhen stood on top of the Dharma pagoda and looked to the east. After 10 years of trekking, in a few more days, the 3,000 soldiers he sent out would reach Zhaoyuan. At that time, as long as everything went according to his plan, the great plan would succeed. In the past, the Yu clan asking for the beasts to help them in battle was actually related to him. Of course, he did not ask anyone to do so. This kind of karma was not something he dared to touch. He only sent a few obedient beasts over. As long as anyone was willing to pay the price, this generation would be willing to serve. As long as the Yu clan was not stupid, they would naturally make the right choice. Later, things developed as he expected. Now that the tribes could not do anything to the Yu clan, it was time for the Ying tribe to step in. As long as they defeated the Yu clan in one fell swoop and helped the son of King Zhao to the position of ruler, then he would have a place in the human path. This way, he could openly search for fated people in the world. Although many fated people had already been found by some cultivators and beasts, that was only a small portion of them. Most of the rest were still in the human path. It was not too late for him to act now. If he succeeded, there was a high chance that he could obtain the Zhou Huanyuan jade. Just as he was deep in thought, he suddenly felt something strange. His expression changed, and he suddenly stood up and looked in a certain direction. Could it be, one of the reasons why Deng Zhang and Yin Ping had sent him here was to find something left behind by a true yang cultivator? Although he was scheming to obtain the Zhou Huanyuan jade, he had always been paying attention to that place. Just now, he had clearly sensed something. But now that he looked again, he found that everything had returned to normal, as if just now was just an illusion. At his level of cultivation, he would not normally lose his mind, but when it came to the true Yang Yuan Zun, it was very difficult to say. He changed his mind. If he went to that person's historical abode, who knew how long it would take? Right now, he was at a crucial point in his plan. At most, he would have a result in a few decades. He might as well wait a little longer and go to that place to investigate. After making up his mind, he sat back down, still staring at where Zhaoyuan was. In a nameless valley in the continent, Chen Mang stood in a pavilion, looking towards the east, lost in thought. Although he had followed Sun Shao to this place and avoided the chaos of the human path, this place was not completely closed off. From time to time, there would be flying letters. The day before yesterday, he heard that the tribes were losing ground, and there were even voices of peace talks with the Yu clan. He was very anxious about this, and wanted to go down the mountain to help in the battle. Once this thought appeared, it became more and more difficult to suppress. He had followed Sun Shao and practiced for 10 years. Because he was already old when he became his disciple, it was impossible for him to open his meridians and break through. Therefore, what he practiced was the mystic art of refining qi and blood. He also had the ability to use elixirs and treasures. He could be said to have some skills, but he also understood that even those cultivators were the opponents of demons. With his own ability, it was impossible for him to achieve his goal, and he might not even be able to rush there. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly looked up and said, "Oh right, senior brother Bai Yi." He turned around and went back to his residence. He poured out a few pills from the gourd hanging on the wall, then ran to the backyard. A white jade lion was lying there, its tail gently swaying. When it saw him, it came up to him in a fawning manner, circling around him. Chen Mang tossed the elixir to it and let it swallow it. Then he went up to the majestic mane and said, "Senior brother Bai Yi, aren't you bored staying here all day? Why don't you follow me down the mountain to play?" The jade lion shook its head and sent a thought to him. Chen Mang said, "All right, we'll go early and return early." The jade lion grunted and agreed. Chen Mang thought, with senior brother Bai Yi's help, I'll be able to avoid enemies in time. He was afraid that Sun Shao would find out and stop him, so he decided to leave immediately. At this moment he glanced over and saw an incense burner on the stone table. His eyes brightened. This item looked normal, but it was actually a treasure. The last time he saw it, when Sun Shao used it, he only needed to chant a spell, and anything would turn into ashes. So, with a sweep of his sleeves, he rolled it in and flipped onto the back of the jade lion. With a soft cry, he flew into the sky. At this moment, in another pavilion, Sun Shao was standing there and watching. He could tell that this disciple had a lot on his mind, but he was told by Zhang Yan that if he insisted on doing something, he could persuade him, but it was best not to forcefully stop him. In fact, he could even help him when it was convenient, such as the white jade lion and that treasured incense burner. Without his permission, he could forget about controlling them. Seeing this disciple disappear into the sky, he returned to the cave abode and bowed to a jade annulus. After a short while, spiritual light floated, and Zhang Yan's figure appeared. After seeing him, he bowed again and said, "Teacher, my disciple has gone down the mountain." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "I understand." Since Chen Mang has entered my sect, if he encounters any danger, you don't have to worry about anything else. You can help him resolve it. He felt that although Chen Mang was a fated person, no matter what, he was still a disciple of Xinyuan sect. If he encountered a situation where he would definitely die, it meant that it was impossible for the origin jade to appear. So, at that time, he should still help him. Chapter 1765. 7 to 8 days later, the Ying division that Qing division had been waiting for arrived. Although there were only around 3,000 strong warriors in the Ying clan, there were over 80 Magisprius following them. Other than these Magisprius, there were also 3 Qi trainers from the Ying clan. More importantly, Bai Xing and the other Qi trainers had brought a lot of treasures that could be used to recruit cultivators. Under normal circumstances, to transport these items, it would require hundreds of cows and horses. To transport them across the wilderness, it was almost impossible. It was only because Yuanjin gave them a cosmos sack that he made himself that he could carry it with him just now. The leader of the Ying division was called Ying Guan. After some reorganization, he suggested to Cheng Liang that before the Yu clan knew of their arrival and reacted, they should send their troops to attack as soon as possible. They might be able to catch them off guard. He was willing to lead the Ying division's men and go first to open up the situation. This suggestion was exactly what Cheng Liang wanted, and he immediately agreed. Therefore, the people of Ying division went first, while the Cheng division led the army and the messengers from other divisions and followed behind. This time, the Ying division was prepared. Every time they arrived at a city gate, they would first order the recruited cultivators to activate the formation. As soon as the demon cultivators guarding the gate came out, they would immediately take out the golden chain that Yuanjin gave them. Once this treasure was out, no matter who it was, as long as they were tied up, they would stop breathing and fall down, unable to move. And once these demon cultivators left, the mortal guards naturally had no one to rely on. They either scattered or knelt down and surrendered. The Ying division did not care about them, only leaving a few people to guard the gate. They did not stop and went to the next gate. When the Cheng division's army arrived, they realized that they did not even need to fight. They could easily take the gate into their own hands. In the following period of time, the Ying division used the treasure in their hands to advance all the way to the east. Every attack was successful. It could be said that they were unstoppable. But after 30 days, the army had already advanced to the Hao Gate. This gate was built by King Zhao years ago. Seeing that Zhao Yuan was not safe to defend, he gathered over 1,000 Magispriists, moved mountains and earth, and built it. It could be said to be a strategic location. After passing through this gate, it would be a flat plain. The one in charge of guarding this place was a demonic cultivator called Duan Yu. Although the Yu clan had invited many beast cultivators to help in the battle against the other tribes, these people were usually only at the Qi refinement or mystic light realm. Even core formation realm cultivators rarely showed up. This was because when they cultivated to this level, they usually had disciples to help them. They didn't have to search for cultivation materials themselves. The reason was different. It was originally a demon of the wasteland. Its original magical power was enough to surpass ordinary core formation cultivators. Later, it accidentally heard a superior scripture. Just now, it knew the cultivation method. There were many monsters in the wilderness who had listened to the original preaching, but they all had different understandings of it. However, he was gifted with excellent comprehension, so he could be considered to have entered the door. Even Jin Yuan noticed his potential. If it weren't for the fact that they'd agreed that disciples of the Khanate demon sect weren't allowed to appear in the human path's territory, and that they still needed Yi Zichen's help here, he would have taken him in a long time ago. Along the way, Ingguan didn't meet a single opponent, so he was very arrogant. He intentionally showed himself before his troops. When the troops behind him arrived, he immediately called a Taoist cultivator to challenge him. Not long after, a golden light flashed in the sky. A man in Taoist robes appeared. He had handsome eyebrows and bright eyes. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he had a sage-like appearance. Ingguan was a little surprised. Although all the beast cultivators he'd met in the past were also transformation stage, their divine qi was different from humans. Usually, their qi was very fierce. With one look, one could tell that they were of a different species. However, this person was different. He seemed to be a person with Tao. However, he didn't take it to heart. Seeing him come out, he impatiently took out the golden chain. Seeing the golden chain fly over, Duan Yu's eyes were filled with mockery. He already knew that the other had this treasure, so how could he not be prepared? He immediately took out a seal and chanted scriptures. In an instant, his voice shook the plains. The golden chain fell down. Although it trapped him, it couldn't take him down because it was half a foot away. Ingguan's expression changed when he saw this. He knew that he'd encountered a tough opponent. Fortunately, he'd expected to encounter some difficult opponents before he came, so he wasn't without a plan. He shouted, "Everyone, please help me with all your strength." The 3 Qi practitioners that came with him heard this. They all formed hand seals and offered their Qi and arcane energy to help. But even so, it wasn't enough to fight against this monster cultivator. The golden chain only tightened a little, and like before, it couldn't be retracted no matter what. Ingguan couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. His cultivation level wasn't high, and now, he felt that he couldn't hold on anymore. The 3 Qi practitioners were even worse off. Their faces gradually turned pale. Above the city walls, as the chanting grew louder, the golden chain actually started to tremble. It looked like it was going to break free. The expressions of the troops below all changed. The reason the army could reach here was because of this treasure. If they suffered a setback this time, it wouldn't be as simple as losing the battle. Not only would the territories they previously occupied be taken back by the Yu clan, they might not even be able to keep their lives. Right at this moment, all of them didn't notice that a jade white lion had flown over from the sky. Chen Meng rode on the lion's back and looked down. He immediately recognized Duan Yu as a monster cultivator. At this moment, it was obvious that the tribes were at a disadvantage. They would probably lose soon. He circled around twice. He wanted to help, but he didn't know where to start. After all, the difference in cultivation level between him and the monster cultivator was too big. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the incense burner and thought, "I can only try." He took off the backpack on his back and took out the incense burner. He poured some inner qi into it and chanted a few incantations. Then, he threw the incense burner down. When the incense burner went down, it suddenly flipped over. The edge of the burner was instantly aimed downwards. A ray of fire shot out from inside and landed on Duan Yu's body. The latter's skin and flesh were instantly charred. his tendons and bones were exposed. He couldn't help but let out a cry of pain. The chanting of incantations was immediately cut off. Ingguan originally thought that he was going to lose this time. When he suddenly saw this chance, his spirit was lifted. He was overjoyed and immediately used all his strength to activate the golden chain. This time, there was no more obstruction. With a flash of light, Duan Yu was already tightly bound. In an instant his chi orifice was closed. He fell straight back and didn't move anymore. Seeing this, Chen Mang waved his hand and kept the treasured incense burner. He patted the white lion lightly and landed on the ground. Cheng Liang saw this mighty white jade flying lion and didn't dare to underestimate the newcomer. He walked forward and bowed. "Thank you, immortal elder, for saving me. May I ask how I should address you?" Chen Mang flipped over and returned the greeting. "Master Cheng is too polite. Mang is not some immortal elder." When Cheng Liang heard how he addressed him, he was stunned. He stared at him for a while and said in surprise, "Isn't this young Master Ji?" Chen Mang smiled bitterly. "Mang is now a cultivator. I only hope to kill my enemies as soon as possible. There's no need to mention my past identity." In terms of identity, he was the younger brother of King Zhao, Zhu Chao. When the Yu clan rebelled, he happened to be out hunting and didn't return. That was why he managed to escape with his life. However, the Yu clan soldiers kept searching for his whereabouts. If he didn't join Sun Zhao's sect, his ending would be obvious. Cheng Liang laughed and took a few steps forward. He grabbed his arm and shook it a few times. He said happily, "Heaven's will, heaven's will." Young Master Ji came at the right time. Liang was originally worried about the nation-stabilizing drum in the hands of the Yu clan. "Young Master, you're the direct descendant of King Zhao. With you here, there's nothing to be afraid of." The Yu clan possessed the nation-stabilizing drum that King Zhao built when he was conquering the tribes of the other races. Once it was struck on the battle formation, no matter what kind of supernatural power the enemy had, they would be unable to use it. However, if there was a direct descendant of the Zhao clan in the enemy formation, then this miraculous effect wouldn't occur. Cheng Liang had always been worried about this in the past. Now that Chen Mang was here, he naturally didn't have to worry about this anymore. When Ingguan heard his identity, his heart jumped. The purpose of his trip was to help young Master Suochong ascend to the throne and become the ruler of the Zhao nation. He didn't think that Zhu Chao still had a younger brother who hadn't died. It seemed that he had become the disciple of some cultivator. His eyes flashed. He thought that if this person was after the throne, it could be a hindrance to the great plan that his clan leader had given him. In this instant, he had the thought of getting rid of this person. Because Duan Yu had been captured, the soldiers guarding Hao Pass had no more morale. They were quickly taken down. Once this pass was defeated, Wang Jing was right in front of them. Cheng Liang thought that the time to conquer the world wasn't far. That night, he held a banquet with all the messengers and generals and suggested that Chen Mang be crowned King Zhao. Chen Mang tried to refuse but to no avail. In the end, he could only agree. He said that he was only taking the throne temporarily. After the Yu clan was destroyed, he could choose another disciple of the Zhao clan to succeed him. On the other side, Hao Pass was defeated. The Yu clan was also unusually panicked. They gathered their clan members to discuss and decided to open up their treasury. They sent out an edict to invite all the demons and beasts in the world to help in battle. This caused the beasts to call for friends and continuously attract more of their own kind. For a moment, Wang Jing was filled with demonic energy. Black clouds covered the sky. It was a place that didn't belong to the human world. But half a month later, Cheng Liang led his troops to Yujing. However, because the pass here was tall and sturdy, and there were shallow jinji that the Yu clan had invited to set up, he wasn't in a hurry to attack the city. Instead, he set up camp outside and prepared to attack the city together when the armies of the other clans arrived. In the Dayan Plains, inside the Tower of 10,000 Techniques, Jin Yu wore a white robe. He held a jade chain in his hands and a rope on his feet. He sat on the stone lotus seat on the altar. Behind him was a Luo Kong painting wall that was given by the two celestial lords. The scenery on the wall changed from time to time, showing the wonderful land of paradise. At the bottom of the stairs, a divine light suddenly appeared. His junior apprentice brother Di Tsulua came to the front of the seat. He bowed and said, "Senior apprentice brother, there's a letter from Zhao Yuan. The Yu clan is already in danger. Should we lend a hand?" Jin Yuan shook his head and said, "There's no need for that. Spreading the wonderful method to the east is to attract fated people to expand our sect. The killing in the human world isn't what I want. Now that the fated people of my sect have arrived, let the rest of the people do as they please." He had long understood that if there were no accidents, the Ying tribe would be supported by the Heartless sect. And behind the various clans, one could vaguely see the four great people, Yuan Zun. Now that the Yu clan was on the brink of destruction under the influence of the disciples of both sides, this chess piece could be abandoned. And according to the calculations of the two celestial lords, they didn't have to do anything. They just had to sit and wait for the birth of the primordial jade. If this item didn't fall into the hands of the people, there might be a fight among the mighty people. But this wasn't something they could intervene in. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.